Synopsis. A trickster is only a trickster until someone knows your tricks. Humans are hypocritical, contradictory beings. Self-satisfaction is always the leading cause for action, no matter if it's for good or evil. What happens when a person who knows this truth gets the chance to live out his dreams in another world? When James suddenly got transported into a world in the form of a game that he had played with an unknown girl named Sophie, his only ambition was to survive the inevitable war that would come. What he didn't know was that this world wasn't quite as simple as he hoped, and even in another world, humans were all the same. Just because a lot of people are getting the wrong idea, this is not a multiple lead novel. Yes, Sophie does have a large part in the story, but the one and only MC is James. The further you come along in the story, the more it will be focusing on him. If you enjoy this little story, please do check out my new project as well, Blessed by Lucifer. Chapter 2, Prologue 1. So, I have no choice but to get transmigrated into that game then? That's right, but I think I already told you that it wasn't a game in the first place. It was just a simulation of the world you are going to. Currently sitting in front of the black-haired man dressed in a fancy suit behind his big desk, I couldn't help but feel a slight headache emerge. I had already accepted that the words this god spoke were true, as evident by the fact that he had shown me my own dead body. I had died in my living room from a brain aneurysm, most likely triggered by yet another one of my marathon sittings of gaming. The game I had played was also still imprinted in my mind, Destiny of a Hero. Pretty much a classic RPG game where you would create a character and follow the hero in order to save the world. This was also the world that God now wanted me to transmigrate into. He had already explained most of the things that I needed to know before I got my new life. The world was incredibly similar to the game that I had played, with the exception of hidden items and manuals. Pretty much meaning that there would be no way for me to get a super cheat in order to climb to the top of the apex. There were some things going for me though. I was going to get to go through a character creation where I would choose my inherent stats and a main manual. In simpler words, I would get to choose my class. In the game, the player could find manuals and choose if they wanted to use them as their main manual or their extra manual. This was pretty much just their main class and their subclass. Unfortunately, the concept of levels didn't exist in the world I was going to. Instead, they had another progression system that was more in line with cultivation. So, are you ready to create your character? As I said earlier, you cannot change your appearance as it is bound to your soul. Interrupting my thoughts, the god urged me on, wanting me to conclude our meeting as soon as possible. As my gaze settled on the faceless man, I opened my mouth and began to settle my destiny. Fine. I'm ready. As he raised his right arm, a big blue semi-transparent screen appeared in front of me. It was the same as when I had played the game, with the exception that I didn't get to choose my physical appearance. It didn't take long for me to choose my stats, completely replicating the build that I had enjoyed the most when playing the game. It was based on almost completely agility and intelligence, which would complement the manual that I would get to choose after this. I'm done. Who? Already? Well, as long as you are happy with your choice, I am not one to say otherwise. Now, what manual do you want your body to assimilate? As I had already chosen my stats because of the manual I had in mind, I instantly answered the god. I want the Trickster manual. The small office went silent. This was the first time that the faceless head in front of me reacted, a reaction which I assumed to be was one of surprise. Are you sure? It didn't take a genius to understand why he was hesitant to let me choose the manual I wanted. The problem was the fact that it was an unranked manual. Most manuals were graded 1-7 stars, like the Hero's Sword of Light, which was a 7-star manual. But the Trickster wasn't graded at all. It pretty much meant that one couldn't rely on it to get strong without extreme efforts. I'm sure the god gave up after seeing the resolution in my eyes, now knowing that no matter what he said I wouldn't change my mind. Okay, fine. Just know that there is no going back from this. There wasn't a single fragment of me that hesitated. I knew what I wanted, and, most importantly, I knew why I wanted it. Okay then. Before I let you out of here, I'm going to change your body according to your chosen stats and the manual you choose. You might want to grit your teeth, young one. Snap. Standing up, He snapped his fingers, which triggered something inside of my body. It felt as if my whole body started to eat itself, with organs getting replaced and bones switching places. Fuck. Please make it stop. The pain escalated more and more, almost making death feel like a very valid alternative right now. And then, all of a sudden, it just stopped. When I opened my eyes, I noticed that I was lying on the white floor with sweat pouring out of all my pores. Now get up. We still have one more thing to do before you get going. Turning my head, I saw the suited man at my side, impatiently waiting for me to get up. You fucker. Scared to antagonize my dear friend, I kept my thoughts to myself and forced myself to my feet. So what now? Didn't I receive everything I would get already? As I had already managed to get onto my feet, he turned back at me and explained, "You have. But there are still some more things that I have to explain to you and your comrade before you get to go." My comrade? You will know what I mean in a second. Snap. With another snap of his fingers, reality started to warp around us. After just a couple of seconds, we were now standing in the middle of a huge stadium. In front of us, another person appeared. "Sorry miss, this guy here took a bit longer to finish than I thought." Wasn't he surprised by the fact that I was so fast with my choices just a couple of seconds ago? Without minding my stupid thoughts, their conversation continued. "Oh, it's fine. It's not like I had anything planned anyway." "Ha. You know, because I'm dead?" Looking at the person, I couldn't help but be surprised. In front of us stood a drop-dead gorgeous tall woman with pink hair reaching her shoulders. Her body was slim but still athletic, with curves in all the right places. Complemented with an innocent face, she was the dream of a lot of men. Even more surprisingly, she seemed to be as tall as the god at my side. Both of them seemed to be almost 2 heads taller than me, meaning that I pretty much just reached up to their chest level. Wait. I was sure that when I arrived at the office of the god, he wasn't this tall. God? Yes. Did I shrink? Even without a face, I could sense that he started to smirk. "Why yes, young one. Your stats are a reflection of your soul and your body is a reflection of your soul. Thus there was no helping it. Don't worry though, you are not that short. It's just that the miss and I are pretty tall in here." Suddenly, a bright voice cut through our conversation. "Wait. What do you mean, we are tall? How tall are we?" The woman in front of me seemed to be pretty exasperated because of the sudden information that she had just attained. "You are just about 195 centimeters tall, miss, which should be expected as you spent most of your status points into strength." Thud. The lady dropped to her knees, her hands sinking into the ground with a thud. "No way. How am I going to get Arthur to love me like this? I'm a freak." Arthur was the hero in the game, and it appeared that this lady had already made up her mind to try her best and charm him. Unfortunately, she was sure that her large stature wasn't going to make it all too easy, impossible in fact. "So, how tall am I then?" Not minding the crazy lady, I inquired about my own height. Turning his head, the god, I felt that his smirk had once again emerged. "Why, you are just about 160 centimeters tall, young one." Thud. My knees also gave up, now making me take the same position as the crazy lady in front of me, my hands touching the rubbery ground around us. No way. My height. That was the one thing I had going for me in my past life. The god who kept us company couldn't help but laugh. "Ho ho ho ho. See? Maybe you shouldn't have just made your choices arbitrarily before inquiring about their meaning." Both of us just stared daggers into the insensitive jerk that didn't seem to understand our pain. "Now, stop moping around. Aren't you guys interested in seeing the power that you attained?" We don't have much time after all. With both of us having forcefully recuperated, we stood up and went along with his suggestion. Status. Status name, James Jackson. Rank, E strength, F agility, E stamina, E intelligence, E plus mana capacity, D greater than main manual. Trickster, ungraded, minor understanding and ungraded manual for those who don't want to be understood. A trickster is only a trickster until people understand your tricks. Core skill, double trouble. First skill, swap greater than side manual, empty. Chapter 3, Prologue 2. Status name, James Jackson. Rank, E strength, F agility, E stamina, E intelligence, E plus mana capacity, D-greater than main manual, Trickster, ungraded, minor understanding and ungraded manual for those who don't want to be understood. A trickster is only a trickster until people understand your tricks. Core skill, double trouble, first skill, swap-greater than side manual, empty. So this is how it works. Unlike the game, there was no mention of levels, health points, or mana points. Instead, it seemed to have been converted into an alphabetical grading system. From the looks of my status, I had no idea what was average or what was supposed to be good or bad. All I could comprehend was the fact that my choice to use most of my stat points in intelligence and mana, as well as some in agility, had led my status panel to look like it did. In my head, it was perfect for what I wanted to do and how my trickster manual worked. Are you guys done? We both got dragged out of our fantasies of making history by the god at our side. Shutting down our panels, we turned our gazes to the man who held our future in his hands. Good. Now listen, I will try my best to explain the situation with as much clarity as I can. Waving his arms, he made a table and 3 chairs emerge from nothing, with him sitting down in one of them and gesturing for us to follow suit. Looking up at the pink-haired woman, we both made the god company at the white metal table, which looked to be more suited to be placed in a garden. Clasping his hands and putting them down on the table, the god started to enlighten us about the situation that we were a part of. So, you already know that the game you two played wasn't actually a game but another world, and we are supposed to help the hero save it from the demons, I guess. Surprisingly, he shook his head at my question. No, not really. The biggest reason why we are sending you two there is because I am supposed to receive a gift from the goddess of that world, and this is the only practical way for us to open a portal between the worlds. So, we don't have to sacrifice ourselves for the better of the world then? The lady asked with a confused face. It appeared that she had already cemented the same misconceptions as I had before the god had dismissed our thoughts. No, you don't have to. Though it has to be said that the threat of the demons is very much real, and if Arthur somehow dies, then you are all in big trouble. Anyway, let me continue to explain before our time is up. Although we both had a lot of questions to ask, we kept mum to make sure we got to know everything we needed to know. It turns out that the world we were going to was and at the same time wasn't the world of the game we played. As stated before, the world we were going to didn't have the concept of levels or experience points that you gained from slaying monsters. Instead, it was focused on gathering strength through training, both mana cultivation and physical practices. The world was also divided into 3 different countries. The human country in the center Mensch, the multicultural country that contained elves, beastmen, and dwarves in the south Alden. Lastly, the wilderness in the north is called Kurat, where pretty much only monsters lived. It could barely be called a country, but as it did have some inhabitants that regarded the lands as a sovereign state, it was officially regarded as such. Now, you two are going to get transmigrated into Mensch and attend the Academy of Ainu, the same academy where the hero will be attending, just like in the game you played. For some reason, the god looked like he felt that his explanation was enough for us to understand the situation completely. Unfortunately, we both had a lot of questions left unanswered. I lifted my hand to signal that I had something to ask. Yes, what about family and all that? Are we going to be reborn again, or are we just going to force our way into the academy without caring about what they will think of us? It wasn't only I who had this question, as the tall woman also injected herself into the conversation. Yay, how is that going to work? I really don't want to be reborn as a baby again. That would be so embarrassing. Scratching his neck, the god realized that he might have left a bit too much and said, well, you won't be reborn. Instead, I and the goddess of that world have decided to implant you into the threads of fate of the world. In simple terms, we are giving your characters pre-made backstories so they fit in. You will both be orphans who have gotten invited to attend the academy by the principal without having to go through the entrance exam. The woman breathed out hard, relieved that she wouldn't have to go through with having to be a baby and suck another woman's breasts again. And with that, the god stood up and snapped his fingers, snap, making the chairs we were sitting on disappear and our bums fall to the ground. Ouch. Ow. Now, I don't have any more time to talk with you two. You will get 24 hours in this space to understand your abilities before your transmigration begins. If you check your statuses you will get to see the remaining time. Good luck. The god dematerialized right in front of us, leaving us alone, staring at each other. Getting to my feet, I brushed the dirt off my ass and lent a hand to the girl who was still on the ground while simultaneously introducing myself. I'm James. Pleasure to make your acquaintance, miss. As she took my hand, I tried to help her up, but to no avail. She was just too heavy. Her lovely face started to mimic a tomato as she let go of my hand and made her way to her feet on her own. I'm Sophie. It was so incredibly awkward for both of us, for me because I was too weak to help her up and for her because she was too heavy for me to lift her. With her now standing right in front of me, I could finally fully appreciate the size of her. From my new perspective, she could very well be in the Book of World Records for her height. Noticing my scanning gaze, she glared at me with fire in her eyes. Stop staring. I know already, you squirt. Ugh. It was a fatal strike to my heart. I hadn't looked at her at all to make fun of her height or judge her, but I had received a critical strike back. Women are scary. So anyway, we are supposed to practice our manuals here? She said as she looked around the huge stadium. It was a pretty good place for practicing as it had a lot of space to move around. Sadly, I truly didn't want to practice in the same vicinity as her because of my skill. I guess so. We should probably split up so we don't see each other's skills. Crossing her arms, she looked down at me with a confused face. Why shouldn't we practice together so we can help each other? Her words carried a bit of weight to them. If we practiced together we could surely see strengths and weaknesses in each other and help the other one notice them. However, as stated before, I didn't want her to see my skills, thus I used my strongest technique in order to persuade her. I used a white lie as to why I thought it would be better to not know about each other's skills. We don't know how our lives will play out in the future, nor do we know if we will be rivals at the academy. Thus we should practice by ourselves. You wouldn't want me to know about the weaknesses of your manual if we were to have to duel each other later on, right? Putting a finger on her chin, she started to think about it. I guess you are right. Then, I will go this way, but shouldn't we meet up before we get transported to talk a bit about our plans? If we are going to do different things, wouldn't it be better if both of us knew about it to make sure we don't get in each other's way? Sophie was one sharp woman. She efficiently recognized that if we were going to have to share the same world with our knowledge of the game, it would be a great boon for us to not step on each other's feet. I couldn't do anything but recognize her thoughts. Sure. Let's meet up here 2 hours before we get transmigrated then. Concluding our conversation, we walked in opposite directions of each other, far enough for Sophie to just appear as a blur in my eyes. Now, let's see what this baby can do. Chapter 4, Prologue 3. Having spent over 20 hours practicing my manual, I felt like I had a pretty good grasp of the limitations and strengths it had. As evident by the name, the Trickster manual didn't have the purpose of overpowering your enemies with pure strength or by the use of miraculous spells. Instead, it was focused on skillfully manipulating your enemies to create advantageous situations that could be exploited. Double Trouble description: the user creates a physical clone that carries identical characteristics. While this skill is active, the user's mind is split in two, letting him or her control both bodies at the same time. It was a simple core skill, but it carried immense potential. Every manual had a core skill that was gained as soon as the player gained the minimum amount of understanding needed to use it. In the case of Trickster, you gained a body double that could do the exact same thing as the main body. So if you learned to use the fireball spell, the clone could also use it. This was the reason why it was an ungraded manual. In the hands of someone who didn't have the right mindset and didn't see the possibilities, it would be useless. On the other hand, if one knew what was possible, it was one of the most potent skills that existed. In the game I had used it in order to control two characters at the same time, sometimes letting one of them grind XP while the other was in town buying and selling items. Other times I would make them team up to take down a boss monster or farm together. The downside with this was that one of them was always the real body, meaning that if that body died, I would die. The first skill that came with the manual when one gained a minor understanding was something that could be used to prevent this swap. Just as the name suggests, it lets me switch the real body to the fake body, or rather let me switch the real and fake consciousness. This meant that even if the main body suffered deep wounds, they wouldn't get carried over when I used swap. It was incredibly hard to control two bodies at once, but after continually practicing for more than 20 hours I was able to use them both pretty adequately. The split vision was also very disorienting, but it didn't take a long time for me to get used to it. James, come on. Sophie appeared to have already concluded her practice and was now waiting impatiently for my return. As I had already dismissed my clone, making sure that she didn't see what I was able to do, I made my way to the tall pink-haired beauty. She was standing with her arms crossed, looking mighty pissed that I was a bit late. Come on man, now we only have an hour before we get sent. How long can it take to get used to your abilities? I mean, it only took me a couple of hours to get used to my body enhancement. Didn't we agree to keep our manuals a secret, Sophie? Fuck. Sophie seemed to be both a genius and an idiot at the same time. Though it had to be said, I had already concluded that she had chosen some kind of physical damage dealer manual, as evident by her physique. Why else would she spend so many stat points in strength? Waving my hand to move on from her little accident, I carried on with the conversation. So, what do you want to do when we get to the academy? She sat down on the ground cross-legged, which wasn't a problem as we were both dressed in casual training wear in the form of grey hoodies and sweatpants. As she sat down, she took a deep breath and her face flushed a bit. I want to get to know Arthur. PFFT. Don't laugh at me. With me also placing my bum on the ground, I couldn't help but laugh at her innocent desire, something she didn't appreciate much. As stated before, Arthur Luminary was the hero of this story, a cliché copyright hero and a swordsman who had the power of light. He was the heir of the prominent Luminary family who had disappeared after fighting with the demons. In short, he wanted to avenge his dead parents and punish the demon kind for their actions. Shaking my head at her silliness, I tried to keep a straight face to show respect for her wishes. Fine. So you want to get nasty with the hero? Is that all? Stop. Don't say it like that, you midget. Arg. Another fatal blow to my self-respect and confidence. This time, though, it was pretty fair. I had deliberately chosen my words to tease her. Fine, I'm sorry. Just please stop calling me a midget. I was over 180 centimeters in my last life. You know, it was rough having lost more than 20 centimeters of height just to gain the stats that I wanted. I just hoped that as my strength grew, I would grow as well. Seeing my anguish, Sophie's face softened a bit and she stretched her big but delicate hand out. Okay, let's call it truce then. As long as you don't tease me for wanting to get to know Arthur, I won't tease you for your height. Letting her hand engulf mine, I accepted her proposal. Okay, it's a promise. Little did she know that one of my specialties in my former life was teasing people. Sadly, it might also be one of the reasons I ended up as a loner who spent all his time playing games. Moving on from our silly conversation, I got more serious about what her plan actually entailed. So you want to help the hero save the world then? Are you sure about that? That means that you will have to risk your life. Her face turned down to the ground and her hands contracted into fists, her veins bulging a bit. I know, but I want to be by his side, no matter what. Turning her eyes straight into mine, I could see her resolution. This woman is serious about this. She appeared to fully realize what could happen to her if she wanted to pursue the hero romantically, and she didn't seem to mind the risks. It had to be said though, it was all very strange to me. Is she seriously in love with a game character? She hasn't even met him in real life yet? Sophie was probably a bit crazy. Actually, scratch that, she was probably very crazy. What kind of life did she have to fall in love with a virtual character? Even if I also had some 2D characters that I would love to meet in real life, it wasn't ever to the point of me falling in love with them. With that being said, I didn't particularly care. She could live her life however she wanted. Finally, she opened her mouth and inquired about my plans. So, what do you want to do? My desire was so incredibly simple yet so difficult to attain. I want to survive. Frankly, I hadn't given it much thought yet. All I knew for sure was that I didn't want to get involved in the war between the united races and the demons. I was not about to die for the sake of another world. However, I still needed enough power and resources to survive the war. Her brows raised a bit, disappointed in my unmanly answer. So you mean that you get the chance to travel to a game world and all you want is to survive? Isn't this where you men are supposed to say that you want to be the strongest or something? Creating a harem and conquering the vast lands of the world? Sighing, I refuted her words. Don't be so sexist, Sophie. Just because I have a dick doesn't mean that I want to conquer all the untainted flowers of the land. I mean, could you imagine me going around and— Stop, fine. I get it. Just stop talking. Sophie's face was now as red as when I couldn't lift her from the ground. She could very well have been a replacement for Rudolph if Santa decided to upgrade. All of a sudden, I could feel a slight tug. Not a physical one, more like my very soul was getting sucked away by something. I guess it's time. I'll see you on the other side then, Sophie. Sure. Be safe, James. And the last thing I saw was her gentle smile that tried to cover her fear of going into an unknown world. Are you sure that it's going to be all right, Gaia? The earthly god was sitting on a chair in front of a lovely, golden glowing woman who was restless and anxious. It's going to be fine. I mean, they have already played that game you made for over 100 hours each. Even if the real world of yours is a little bit different, they can probably make the best of it. Don't worry, Thea. HRMMM. I hope you are right. You did tell them about the harshness of the academy, right? Because that will most likely not be like the game at all. It will be rough if they don't know about nobles and royalty. A streak of cold sweat started to run down Gaia's forehead as he realized how much he didn't tell the pair of earthlings that he sent to another world. Ha. Of course I did. I would be an idiot not to. Right? Ha. Comment for comment. Vote to left. Send gift. Chapter 5. First day at the academy. One waking up, I was lying in a soft bed in a small apartment. Knowing that I was already at the academy, it didn't take long for me to figure out that this was my living quarters. It was a small apartment, the living room also being the bedroom as well, housing a small kitchen area. It had pretty much all I needed to live: wardrobes, a desk with a laptop already set up, and a small bathroom with a shower. Making my way to the wardrobe, I withdrew a set of some casual black training wear and put it on, which consisted of a black hoodie and black trousers which fit somewhat snuggle around my thin body. I had already gotten enough experience with my body that I knew that my physique was smaller than average, by a lot. Still, I knew that I had made the right choices. The biggest demerit to my manual was the immense amount of mana needed, as well as the necessary agility to free up my movement. Having dressed up, I noticed that other than the front door and the bathroom, there was another door in the apartment. As I opened it up, I was met by an amazing sight. It was a full-sized practice room, the floor made of hardened black rubber and the walls completely white, just like the ceiling, carrying a lot of lights which illuminated the room as soon as I stepped in. On the side was a weapon rack filled with all kinds of different weapons. All kinds of different swords, spears, maces, and many more. Unfortunately, the weapon of my choice was not among them. Guess I'll have to ask a teacher if I can borrow one. Suddenly, a robotic voice rang out in the room. Greetings, Mr. Jackson. This is your personal practice room, which is fully controlled with voice commands. If you want to know about the specific commands, please read the manual that will drop in 3.2.1. Thud. A small pamphlet fell from the ceiling and I quickly picked it up and read through it. Just like the robot had said, it contained the necessary voice commands to set the practice room, mostly consisting of the different dummies that could be brought out. This is great. That means that I can keep my training a secret from everyone else. It could be said to be obvious, but I didn't want anyone to know about my manual as its potency lay in the secrets and surprises it brought. I exited the room as I didn't want to practice with a weapon that wasn't the weapon I was going to use and sat down on my bed again. Double trouble. My body split in two and another James emerged before me, also sitting on a bed. My vision split in two, just as if I was playing a game with a split screen. I assume you know what I want you to do? The James in front of me sighed. Or rather I sighed, Or he sighed. I am not really sure. Of course I know. Why are we talking to ourselves anyway? We are one person, you moron. What did you say? You are the moron. Yes, I am. Because we are one individual, you idiot. As both of me were frustrated with the never-ending banter, I chose to quit being stupid and made my way out of the room with my clone to find a teacher and ask about my weapon. Simultaneously my main body started to try and meditate in an attempt to gather mana. The god had already told us that the two ways to strengthen one's mana were to either find enlightenment in battle or to meditate. Thus I got to it. This was the first thing that I found incredibly efficient about my chosen manual. While my clone was out doing stuff, like fighting or attending class, I could let my main body cultivate. As I, Clone James, left the apartment, I was met by a long hallway filled with doors to other students' rooms. It didn't take long for me to find the way to the exit, which was accompanied by a lounge filled with chairs and tables. The whole building appeared to have been built with some kind of white stone, very similar to marble. The Ainu Academy is pretty rich, I guess. In the lounge, there was a reception with a single brown-haired lady running it. Walking up to her, I started my mission. Excuse me, lady. Turning her head up from the papers she was working on, she met my gaze head-on. Fortunately, it seemed like we were almost the same height, with her just being a couple of centimeters taller, so she didn't have to look down in order to see me. Yes. Do you need something, Mr. Jackson? James Jackson. And yes, is it possible to borrow another weapon from the academy other than the ones we have in our rooms? The lovely lady pondered a bit but soon gave me an answer. I think it's possible. If you tell me what you want, I could probably procure it by tomorrow. I felt my clone face start to smile brightly, incredibly happy about the painless interaction. Thank you, miss. Actually, I need two of the weapon I had in mind. I hope that it doesn't create any problems for you. I realized that unlike in the game, where my weapon would automatically be multiplied when I created my clone, this would not be the case in the real world. Therefore I needed two of them. The woman in front of me just put on a gentle smile. No need to be so polite, Mr. Jackson. It's my job to help the students after all. There won't be an issue even if you need 10 weapons. Just tell me what you need. Oh, and you can call me Samantha. An angel. Clone me. Stop daydreaming. Get on with it. I'm on it. Jeez. It was so incredibly weird to have two bodies with the same fallacies. While my main body was meditating, he was unaffected by the sweet Samantha, while my clone, who was in the vicinity, couldn't help but react to her gentle aura. I need 2 scythes, and it would be great if they weren't longer than 150 centimeters. Yes, my weapon of choice was a scythe. There were many reasons for this. The reach was great and it also carried a bit of versatility as both sides could be used, one for slicing and one as a blunt weapon. However, the most important reason was that they were fucking cool. Yes, I was a bit of a nerd, but come on, imagine a robed, scythe-wielding person that you don't know if it's the real one or a clone. Adding the skills that I would get when I increased my understanding of my manual, there were a lot of good things coming. Unfortunately, Samantha didn't seem to carry the same opinion as her face strained and it looked like she was trying her best not to laugh at the short man who wanted to wield a scythe like a weeb. Sure. PFFT. No problems. Now please go away so I can. PFFT. Having already figured out that she wanted me to leave as quickly as possible so she didn't laugh in my face, I quickly made my way back to where my main body was, which was still meditating and cultivating our mana. As I had concluded what I had to do for the day, I made my clone start physical training consisting of push-ups, sit-ups, and squats. I knew that I could get weights to lift in my practice room, but I was hesitant to make my clone train too much because of one single reason. As soon as I fell asleep, my clone would disappear, and all the training it had gone through would be inscribed on my body. This meant that I would have to bear the consequence of overtraining myself, something I didn't feel like doing before I knew my limits. And like this, I spent my first day at the academy. Why I didn't explore more of the academy grounds. I was a loner for most of my previous life, and although I didn't have a problem talking with other people, it took a large toll on me. I had already spent more than half my social energy level talking to Samantha, So this was enough for today. Sophie's path walking around the academy grounds. I couldn't help but feel so incredibly awkward. There were a lot of students already walking around, scouting the area to prepare for when the classes start in 3 days. All of them were young and full of energy, almost glowing with their beauty and handsomeness. This in itself wasn't a problem. I was a social creature from birth and loved to be around other people, so in that regard, I fit like a glove. The only reason I had played the game in my previous life was because I was bedridden as a result of my illness after all. The awkward part was that I was looking down on 99% of the students. I felt like a giant as I walked around, having to look down in order to make sure I didn't accidentally bump into someone. However, this didn't stop me. I was determined to find the person I was looking for, the one I was sure was already at the training grounds trying his best to grow stronger. Comment for comment. Vote 2 left. Send gift. Chapter 6. First day at the academy 2. I finally got to see him, the one who had saved me from the pain of everyday life when I was bedridden, unable to see my friends or family. In the middle of the training grounds stood a lone man, continually abusing a poor dummy with his sword. Arthur Luminary, the tall man with a perfectly sculpted body that would make most fitness participants green with envy. His perfect V-taper complemented by big arms and athletic legs almost made me drool when I saw him. Adding to that, his beautiful blonde hair and piercing blue eyes were enough to blow my mind. I love him. Without even having spoken to him, I already knew that I loved the man hitting a dummy with his fierce long sword. Gathering some courage, I made my way to him and tried my best to initiate some small talk. Hey there. You are pretty good at using your sword, aren't you? Even though he was incredibly focused on his training, my words still reached him as he let his sword fall to his side and he turned to me with the brightest smile I had ever seen. Oh, sorry. I didn't see you there, and thanks. I practice a lot after all, so it feels good to hear someone compliment me. Oh my god. That smile. That fucking smile. Restraining my emotions, I only let a gentle smile rise on my face. I can see that. Are you training alone? Don't you have someone to practice with? And with that, the bait was planted. Scratching the backside of his head, he looked a bit embarrassed. Well, no, not really. I don't have any friends. No one wants to get along with a commoner, after all. As I already knew that he was a loner at the beginning of the game, I did feel a bit bad about having baited him into telling me about his situation. But it's for the greater good. Oh, I thought that with your looks you would be super popular. His face turned even redder at my sugary sweet words. Oh, thanks again. But no, looks aren't really important here. Shouldn't you know that? You are already attending the academy, right? Arthur appeared to have assumed that I was a senior of his who was already attending classes at the academy. No, I'm going to be a freshman, just like you. A slight smile once again emerged on his face, happy that he had found someone of the same age that might possibly become his first friend. Oh, then I guess we are going to see each other a lot. Ah, my heart. I love you. I love you so much. I guess so. But if you don't have a practice partner, do you want to practice with me? Taking a quick look, I found that I was probably a pretty suitable partner for him to practice with. Status name, Sophie. Red rank, E strength, D agility, E stamina, E plus intelligence, F plus mana capacity, E dash greater than main manual, dragoon, A.A.A.A.A.A. Minor understanding. Follow the steps of the legendary dragonkin and unleash the power of the dragons onto your enemies. Nothing can stand in the way of unlimited strength. Core skill, Dragon Eyes. First skill, Draconic strength dash greater than side manual, empty. My manual was Dragoon, which pretty much let me become part dragon and let me use draconic powers. It was the manual that I found most fun in the game as it let me run through all the content without having to care all too much. I had tried other manuals as well, but most of them were either too complicated or weak for me to find enjoyable. After all, I wasn't playing the game for combat, I was playing it for the love of my life. Arthur's face took on another notch of excitement as I spoke, incredibly excited to not only find a friend but a training partner as well. Sure, I would be happy to spar with you. It was a good thing, but something was irking at the back of my mind. Isn't he supposed to hesitate a bit because of the fact that I'm a woman? Unknown to me, he already had the impression that I was a warrior because of my stature. Even though our heights weren't all too different, he still had to look up a bit at me. A rough estimation would be that he was probably about 190 centimeters tall, meaning I had a good 5 centimeters on him. Let's start then. He had already turned his back and gone further in on the grounds, making his place in a makeshift arena that had a white circle around it. Unable to retort because of his excitement, I also made my way there and got ready to spar. Wait, I have never fought someone before. As I realized what I was about to do, I felt a slight shiver run down my back. Having lived a sheltered life as the miss of a wealthy family, I had never even gotten close to getting into a fight. That being said, something inside of me was telling me that it was going to be fine. Readying his sword, holding it in 2 hands outwards, he shouted, "You can start whenever you want." "I'm ready." "But aren't you going to bring out your weapon from your inventory?" He was probably expecting me to have stored my weapon in our digital smartwatches, which also acted as phones, bank cards, student IDs, and spatial inventory, but my manual didn't use a weapon at all. "It's fine. My weapons are right here." A small, blue fire engulfed my hands as I transformed them into scaly dragon paws, fully adorned with big claws which were as sharp as swords. Needless to say, Arthur was a bit surprised at my sudden transformation. "Holy shit. What is that?" "Don't worry about it." And with that, I sprinted forward. As I approached him, he raised his sword to make a downward slice, fully synced up with the speed I was nearing him. Instinctually, I could see his movement and knew what I had to do. As his sword was nearing my neck, I quickly sidestepped to his side and punched him in his ribs. Arg! Unfortunately, there was one little thing that I had forgotten about before we started sparring, which I happened to remember as soon as I felt my hand make contact with his sturdy body. Wasn't Arthur incredibly weak at the beginning of the game? Before I could conclude my thoughts, which were happening at the speed of light, the man was sent flying several meters before his body hit the ground with a thud. Regaining my senses, anxiety started to quickly bubble up from within me as my thoughts were spiraling out of control. I killed Arthur. No. I ran to his side, clinging to the hope that I didn't kill the love of my life during my first day in my new life. "Arthur, are you okay?" Cough, cough. Luckily, it didn't take more than a couple of seconds before he sat up, coughing out blood from his mouth. For some reason, the idiot was smiling at me as I kneeled at his side. "I am fine. But Jesus, who never existed in the history of this world, you sure are strong, aren't you?" Realizing that I hadn't told him my name yet, I quickly gave it to him. "Sophie, my name is Sophie Red." "And, thanks." I was so embarrassed. My fantasies of him being the prince on a white horse who would save were now completely blown to smithereens, now looking like I would be the one who would wear the pants in our future relationship. Noticing my distress, the perfect man, excluding his current weakness, brought his smile to yet another level. "Don't worry, Sophie. It's not your fault that you are strong. Actually, I admire it a lot. I just wish I was as strong as you. Maybe then I could have." For some reason, the mood got dropped into the Bermuda Triangle, sinking faster than a body strapped to cannonballs in those old mafia movies. Unable to control myself, I patted his head with my still transformed dragon paw. "It's okay. You still have plenty of time to grow stronger. I'm sure you will be strongest in time." Turning his head, he looked at me with eyes filled with hope. "Really? Do you really think so?" "I'm sure of it. Don't worry. I will also help you along the way. Always." "What was that last thing you said?" Having unconsciously blurted out that last part, which was supposed to be an internal thought, I waved my arms and tried to change the subject. "Oh, nothing. I just said that I will help you. By the way, do you want to grab some food? I am starting to get a little bit hungry." Although it was mostly an excuse for us to hang out more, it wasn't a lie. The biggest demerit to my Dragon Eyes skill was that it apparently cost a lot of nutrients to activate, which now created a situation where I felt like I had a hole in my stomach. Yet another blinding smile was thrown at me as he accepted my proposal, Sure. My heart. James's paw. Fuck. This sucks ass. I had just recalled my clone to make myself ready for bed and thereby caused a situation where all my muscles were now spasming and constricting like snakes. It was so incredibly painful that even though I had some plans of going out for a nightly meal at the cafeteria, I was now stuck in my bed. Fuck. I just hope that Sophie's day is just as miserable. It was not. Chapter 7. Second day at the academy. 1. My body was in complete shambles when I woke up. Not only did I have extreme muscle soreness, but it appeared that meditating as well put a lot of stress on one's body, as I could feel my organs were also in pretty bad shape. Hopefully, it was just because my body wasn't used to the strain and, just like when lifting weights, it would adapt with time. Unfortunately, that did not make my current situation any better. Even worse, I knew that I couldn't stop either. I was too desperate for my future survival to relax. Forcing myself to stand up, I made my way to the shower and let the warm water soak my sore body. It also gave me a chance to sort out my thoughts about what plans I had before classes would start in 2 days. The 1st of January was the day when we would officially become freshmen at the academy, and also the day when we would get to know if we got to attend the A class or the B class. Prior to us arriving, they had already sorted the students into either the elite A class or the less elite B class. Both of the classes would still be considered to be elites in the eyes of society, as it was impressive to just attend diner in the first place. From the game, I knew that the A class would be mostly filled with douches, but also the beautiful elven princess from Alden. In the game, Arthur was at first placed in the B class but managed to climb his way to the A class in less than a year, even despite all the nobles trying to bring him down. And this was a problem. I didn't know to what extent they had bullied the man, as it was in a game. I and Sophie had no idea how nobles actually treated commoners in this world, which was the biggest reason I wanted desperately to be placed in the B class. In the B class I had a much higher chance of flying under the radar, giving me the chance to cultivate my strength in peace. Turning off the shower, I staggered into my living room, as well as my bedroom, and put on another set of training wear. Funnily enough, the black set of training wear was also the only clothes I owned, although I owned several pairs of them. Double Trouble, my clone, emerged from my body, in the exact same state as I, with his hair still a bit wet. This also gave me the chance to inspect my looks more carefully for the first time. My dark brown hair, elegant nose, and mature face were a sight to be appreciated. Even in my previous life, I had been very attractive. If not for my small problem with social interactions, both my introverted side as well as not being able to contain my impulse to tease people, I would probably have been pretty popular. The only difference in this world was that my stature was a lot smaller, both height and width, but I was still pretty handsome. So, partner, are you ready for the day? Shut up. We know how it hurts. Can't we just stay at home today? There was food inside of the fridge that we can eat. As I was having an outer inner monologue with myself, I couldn't help but chuckle a bit. I truly did enjoy my own company the best. Sadly, I had things to do. Letting my main body once again sit on the bed, cross-legged, I walked out of the room with clone me to get things done. Walking out of the room was horrible. Now several other students were walking the halls as well, something I disliked a lot. Nevertheless, I made my way to the reception, where I was met by Samantha once again. "Hi, Mr. Jackson. Your weapons are ready for you now." "As you still haven't come to get your smartwatch, I took the liberty to put them in there." "I assume that you know how it works already?" Taking the smartwatch from her hand, I felt pressured to lie. "Of course I do." "No worries. Have a great day." Not wanting to stay and let her figure out that I had no idea what I had been given, Clone Me quickly made his way back to our room. Bam. Huff, huff. With my back to the door, I was breathing heavily because of the awkward situation I had just gotten out of. Not wanting to disturb myself meditating, I started to fiddle with the device in order to see how it worked. After a couple of seconds, I managed to make a blue projection appear from the watch. "Inject your mana to synchronize with the device." Seeing no need to not do as the polite watch told me, I injected some mana into it, which made another screen of text appear. "Synchronization completed. Have a pleasant day, Mr. Jackson." "Oh, why thank you, talking watch. It didn't take me long to figure out the rest of the device. It had a lot of very important uses, with the spatial inventory just being one of them. I guess I will have to take good care of this. There was one very important thing that I had to check before I was done with it though, and that was to check my bank account. Bank account balance, $1,000. Oh wow, $1,000. That's, I don't know. Although my intentions had been good, I didn't even know what things would cost in this world. Thankfully it appeared that, for some incredibly weird reason, they were using the American dollar here as well. Guess I'll move on then. Using my spatial inventory, I could see that 3 items were stored in it. 2 of them were, as expected, scythes, but there was also a third item in the form of a letter. What's this? Unable to contain my curiosity, I brought out the letter from the watch and with a small pop, it appeared in my hand. Whoa. It's just like magic. It is magic, you moron. Alright. Opening the letter, I was incredibly disappointed. It was just a letter of welcome from the academy which contained some information about how the watch worked when at the academy. The watch would contain our schedules and had a GPS function that would lead us to the right classrooms in case we got lost. Another bust. Luckily, that meant that I only had one thing left to do. It's time. I brought out one of the scythes, which was conveniently placed directly into my hand. Heavy. The scythe was made out of pure black metal, matching incredibly well with my training wear and, both fortunately and unfortunately, matched very well with my edgy vision of becoming an elusive reaper. Using another function of my watch, I let it scan the weapon in my hand. Practice scythe of any description. Ordinary scythe made by a confused blacksmith who has no idea what the student who ordered it was thinking. I'm not upset. But we are upset. Dismissing the negative thoughts of an oblivious blacksmith, I made my way to the practice room, scythe in hand. Set dummy. Unmoving, indestructible. F rank. It only took a couple of simple commands for a dummy to rise from the floor. It was a very traditional wooden dummy that carried a sword and shield in its hands. The stage was now set for the descent of a reaper. I quickly swung the scythe with both hands, ready to slice at the dummy in front of me. However, as I was not used to the weight, it ended in me losing his balance and falling to the floor. Ow! This was not what I had in mind at all. This wasn't the descent of the trickster of death, this was the descent of a clown. Practice makes perfect. Stealing my mind, I rose once again, and this time I was determined to not make the same mistake again. At the same time, I was still meditating with my main body, slowly but surely accumulating and purifying more mana. Sophie's puff lifting my head from my pillow, I instantly remembered the insanely wonderful day I had yesterday. Not only did I meet the real-life Arthur that had saved me in my previous life, we even agreed to become friends. Burrowing my face in my pillow, I couldn't help but let out an incredibly girly scream. Even though I had beaten his ass during our spar, everything had turned out fine in the end. He also didn't seem to have a problem with my size either, making me even more excited for the future. Letting go of my teenage excitement, which was pretty embarrassing as I was well above the age of a teenager in my head, I made my way to the shower. Although I had to some degree found some peace in my new body, there were a couple of things that bothered me quite a bit, with 2 of them being attached to my chest. They were a lot bigger than the pair I had been equipped with previously, and it made it awkward to move around like I used to. As I stood in the shower, the second issue also showed its face, as my face was a bit taller than the shower head that was supposed to let the water fall on me. Slightly crouching, I turned on the water and let myself get swept up in the warmth. Excited for a new day with new possibilities. Comment for comment. Vote 2 left. Send gift. Chapter 8. Second day at the academy. Having spent most of my day practicing the use of my scythe, me and my clone were now standing in front of the biggest challenge yet. I have to eat. Having already skipped one day of eating, my insides felt it was eating themselves. With sorrow in my eyes, I looked at Clone Me. Do you think what we have in the fridge is enough for a healthy meal? It was after all him, or me, who had suggested staying in for the day and just eating what we had available. Unfortunately, I both knew that it was a bad idea. We only have crackers and milk. I don't think it will be good to not eat a real meal if I am planning on training so much. Yay, I am right. Fuck. I have no choice then. Recalling my clone, it felt like I was punched in the gut when I felt the exhaustion after swinging a scythe for multiple hours. Luckily, his sweat didn't come with it. Phew. I can do this. Taking a deep breath, and with determination in my eyes, I set the GPS on my watch to the cafeteria and got going. Walking out of my room was horrible. Once again I was surrounded by other students who stood in the halls, chatting, having fun. Forcing myself to concentrate on my watch, I made it out of the apartment building. Although I was connected to my clone, there was a slight difference in how my brain received our surroundings. My main body was a bit more receptive and connected than my clone, which in this case was a very bad thing, as it only increased my anxiety. As my feet dragged me through the grounds, I couldn't help but be amazed by the other students. They all looked like they came straight out of a Hollywood movie, the boys tall and athletic and the girls tall and beautiful. Yes, in my eyes almost everyone else was tall. In just a couple of minutes, which felt a lot longer, I had found my way to the cafeteria where I happened to stumble upon a familiar face, as well as a not-so-familiar face whom I still knew. James, are you here to eat too? It was Sophie and, who I assumed to be, Arthur that was also standing just outside of the cafeteria, most likely getting ready to eat together. Oddly enough, it looked like Arthur was in pretty bad shape. Is he already getting bullied? What I didn't know was that his state was the result of once again sparring with Sophie and, once again, getting his ass kicked. Before I could even open my mouth, I was met by a disgustingly bright smile coming from the hero of our story. Oh, are you a friend of Sophie? God, you make friends so easily. Sophie. Stop, Arthur. You are making me blush. Watching him compliment the Amazon and seeing her cheeks flushing made me feel nauseous. I want to go back and talk to myself. It was truly a shame that I had already gotten entangled with these idiots, as it would now be considered incredibly rude if I just walked away. Something my awkward heart couldn't take. In order to not have to stay out of my room a second longer than necessary, I took control of the conversation. Raising my hand towards Arthur, I introduced myself. Hello, I'm James Jackson. And I guess you could say that I'm a friend of Sophie. As he took my hand and looked down at me, his smile once again gave me shivers. Hi James. I'm Arthur Luminary. But what do you mean by I guess? Having concluded our small handshake, I quickly dismissed his question. Oh, long story. Anyway, I'm starving. Let's go and eat. Not waiting for their response, I entered the nightmare difficulty dungeon in front of me. As the automatic doors opened, I was met by the sound of happiness and joy coming from the students who were appreciating their academic lives. I hate this. The cafeteria was pretty much divided into two parts. To my right was a queue for the lunch ladies who served the food, and to my left were several tables, big and small, where you were supposed to eat your food. Luckily, the queue wasn't all too long and I quickly got to one of the lunch ladies. Oh, aren't you a cutie? Well, if you are going to grow you need to eat a lot. So here you go, a double serving to make sure you get enough nutrients. Thanks. I wasn't unhappy about the massive amounts of rice and meat that I got on the tray that I started carrying to an unhabituated table. In fact, it seemed to be the perfect amount for my starving body. Nor was I unhappy by the fact that she wanted to help me grow. I also wanted to help me grow after all. However, calling me a cutie, you will see when the trickster descends. Sitting down at a table with 4 chairs, to make sure that my friends could sit with me, as it would be incredibly discourteous to not make sure there was room for them, I started wolfing down the food in front of me. It's so good. While I was on the verge of crying as my poor body finally got the calories that I had exempted it from, Dumb and Dumber arrived at the table as well, with Dumber seemingly astonished that I had almost emptied my plate already, which he didn't even know was a double serving. Wow, I didn't think you were that big of an eater. Taking a swig of the water I had gotten with my food, I emptied my mouth to respond. Well, it kind of happened that I didn't eat yesterday. Too busy training. His eyes opened wide, almost as if he was impressed by what I had just said. To be fair, as I didn't tell him that I was afflicted with the worst muscle pain I had ever felt and that it made me unable to leave my bed. It probably did sound pretty impressive. Not minding the big, beautiful, elegant "No, stop me. Get back to work. We have to get back to our room." Even though it was weird that I had begun thinking in plural, my spoon started to move yet again. As if she didn't see how determined I was to get away from them, which she probably didn't, Sophie started some small talk as well. "So, James, what have you been up to?" "Me and Arthur have spent most of our time training, pretty hard as well." Getting sweaty and "What did you say, Sophie?" "You are doing that thing again when you start talking too quietly for anyone to hear." Even though Arthur didn't hear what she said, I heard it clearly. "Pervert." Her gaze quickly shifted to me, her eyes violent with anger. "What did you say?" "FTM diaresis FTM FTM section FTMZ FTM sense FTM yen." My bad habit had yet again bitten me in the ass. Although I didn't think it was that big of a deal, that I couldn't keep my mouth shut, when I looked at the big woman in front of me that could strangle me with one hand. A bit of cold sweat emerged on my back. "Nothing, madame." I said nothing. "Anyway, I have only been training, mostly meditating and physical training." Arthur once again seemed pretty excited by my words, happy that he had found another training addict like him and Sophie. "Oh, you are also training hard, huh? Have you also managed to break through to E rank like Sophie?" Although it was a bit unfair to say that I have broken through, as we were sent here as E ranks, I just told him a half-truth. "Yay, me and Sophie are probably the same rank." "That's incredible." "Oh, I also want to be strong like you guys." "I am still stuck in F rank after all." "Oi, why did he get so depressed all of a sudden? Isn't he supposed to be a hero?" This wasn't something that I wanted to see at all. I knew from the game that he was weak in the beginning, but what I didn't know was that his mental strength was abysmal. Signaling with my eyes towards Sophie, I tried to communicate mentally. "Yo, is this guy okay?" "Yes, the food was really good." It didn't work. Thankfully, I had finished my food in record time and thus I was getting ready to climb back into my cave, hopefully not leaving again for the foreseeable future, or at least until classes start. During my distress before I had figured out that one could order food to stock up in the fridge, which I had quickly done. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be delivered until tomorrow, which had created my current predicament. Standing up, I began to say my goodbyes to the stupid pair and tried to make my escape. "Thank you for this time, guys. I'll be making my way back to my room to continue my training." Arthur easily accepted my words and construed them as proof of my devotion to growing stronger. Sophie, however, managed to somehow look through my act with ease. "Are you honestly that introverted?" "We have barely been here for 15 minutes, you know." Not minding the daggers that she repeatedly stabbed into my heart, I forced a smile and concluded this hurtful conversation. "Every second that I am staying here is a second less I spend on training. Therefore I must take my leave." As I turned around and started to walk away, a disgusting voice could be heard behind me. "So cool." Comment 3. Comment. Vote 2 left. Send gift. Chapter 9, Trouble Brews 1. As I was meditating and training my proficiency with my scythe, I was incredibly content with how my third day at the academy had gone. There hadn't been a need to interact with anyone throughout the entire day. Pure bliss. With the time now nearing evening, I was getting confident that I was going to get to keep my serene environment all up until the courses start tomorrow. Alas, woe is me. Knock, knock, knock. As soon as I had started to fully relax, someone was knocking on my door. Although I could choose to not open it, it wouldn't be polite to do so. Therefore I quickly recalled my clone, letting my scythe fall to the floor in the practice room and making my body feel how hard it had worked today. It hurt a lot. Mustering all the energy that I barely had left, I went to the door and opened it. Lo and behold, I was met by the stupid pair that I had shared a meal with yesterday. "What do you want?" Though I didn't mean to sound rude, I was now so incredibly exhausted that I couldn't force myself to act overly polite. Looking up at the pink-haired woman, I could see that she did not appreciate my blunt approach as she crossed her arms and her eyes got filled with annoyance. "So, Arthur here was thinking of inviting you to dinner at the academy bar, to celebrate that our classes start tomorrow." At first, I told him that you probably didn't want to, because you were too busy training, but looking at you now, you don't have a drop of sweat on you. So you are coming with us. I could clearly see that she knew what she was doing, now pretty much forcing me to come with them. Never did I ever think that the fact that the sweat from my clone didn't carry over would lead me into such a horrible situation. The worst part was that now I couldn't refuse them. It wouldn't be polite to do so. It was one of the things that I appreciated and hated most about myself. My mother had taught me from a very early age what was socially acceptable and what was not, and I stuck to her words almost compulsively. It was just unfortunate that my stupid mind had gotten the whole teasing is a sign of friendship thing wrong. Yay, come with us. It's going to be fun. You can't just train all day anyway, that would be psychotic. Arthur had stepped forward, making me feel like a vampire who had stepped out in the sun, his whole ambience burning my very soul. Go away, Daywalker. With a sigh, I resigned myself to my fate, although I had some added conditions. Fine, I'll come with you. But only if we can find a corner table and you can promise me that I will be back within 2 hours. Oh, and please wait outside for a second so I can freshen myself up. In my head, these were completely reasonable conditions for me to leave my cave, but the two people just looked at me with pity. One of them because he thought I was addicted to training and the other because she knew that I was an inherently pathetic being of a man. Fuck. There had been a corner table vacant for us to sit at, something that wasn't part of my calculations. I knew that they were the most popular places to sit on Earth, but here that didn't appear to be the case, as most people sat in the middle of the restaurant. See, it isn't that bad. The happy woman in front of me, with me sitting as close to the corner as possible, tried to convince me that this wasn't the worst thing I had experienced in a long time. Sure. Stop. You are souring the mood, you know. Now, what do you guys want to eat? The more I was around Sophie, the more I could understand her character. When we had met each other because of the god, I had assumed that she was a complete shut-in, like me. However, this wasn't the case at all. The tall woman was incredibly comfortable with social interactions, even to the extent that I would call her the E-word. Yes, an extrovert. I want the boar steak. Oh, and a big beer. Arthur was very excited about this whole thing, almost making me wonder if he had ever been at a restaurant before. It was even weirder as this was one of the academy restaurants where you got to eat for a selected amount of credits every week, meaning it was, in fact, free. It's so good that we don't have to spend any Unity State dollars to eat here. What did he say? I'm sorry, what? Unity State? What's that? Turning his head up from the menu, he looked at me with his usual gentle expression. Oh, you know, USD? Like the collective currency of mentioned Alden? Oh no, I'm an idiot. My stupid ass had assumed that USD would mean the same in this world as it did on Earth, which, while thinking about it, was so incredibly moronic that I wanted to cry. I was just happy that I got to know this information now instead of maybe making a horrible mistake at a bank. I'm going to order the giant salmon. I heard from some other students that it was supposedly really good. Both me and Arthur looked at the girl who had just spouted insanity. Other students? Did that mean she actually mingled with people? Before I could comment on her craziness, the golden boy intervened. Oh, you are already talking to other people as well. You sure are popular, Sophie. He went back into the pitiful state that I had seen yesterday when we talked about Tranks, full of self-depreciation, showing his awful self-esteem. As fast as a bullet, Sophie picked up the grumbles of the man who had just imploded. Don't worry, Arthur. I'm sure you will be popular as well in the future. No, I know you will. Disregarding the fools at my side, I made my order to the waitress who had already made her way to our table. I want a boar steak and a glass. No. A bottle of whiskey, please. Though she seemed incredibly disturbed by my order, she kept a professional demeanor and wrote it down before taking Sophie's and Arthur's orders as well. It didn't take long for our orders to reach our table and we started our feast. While Arthur and Sophie kept on making small talk while we were eating, I kept mum in order to pay respect to our food, not because I had nothing at all to add to their conversation. This whiskey is pretty good. One of the biggest pleasures in my last life had been this godly drink. invented by some kind of super genius a long time ago. The biggest reason why I made the choice to order an entire bottle was that, for some reason, I had an incredibly hard time getting drunk. Like now, where I had emptied almost 3/4s of a bottle and I was barely feeling a buzz. Not minding the looks of disgust that my company gave me, I continued drinking after having emptied my food. All in all, it was a pretty horrible experience, but at least the food had been great. As I got ready to take my leave, a group of 3 students started to make their way to our table, clearly not having something good in mind. 2 of them were guys with red and green hair respectively, and the third was a girl with dirty blonde hair. So this is where the bullying starts. Having a feeling that this would not be a pleasant experience, I resolved myself and stood up. "Sorry guys, it seems we have company." "And not the good kind." Sophie also stood up, with Arthur meekly following suit, now also seeing what was about to go down and not having none of that. "So James, what do you think we should do?" Turning my head back towards the tall girl, I let my grin reach new heights as I released a devilish smile. "Trust me, I have a plan that will solve this." And with that, I used swap to switch my main body with the clone that I had left in the room and released the clone, making me disappear from the restaurant. Sophie's poff, "Trust me, I have a plan that will solve this." And with that moron went up in smoke and disappeared. It took a couple of seconds for me to understand what had just happened, to understand that James had just ditched us completely using some weird kind of skill. "Fuck you James." I couldn't help but scream, accidentally startling my beloved in the process, as I saw that we were now going to have a 2v3 situation. Before I knew it, the group of students had reached our table, with the red-haired guy taking the lead. "So, you actually dared to show your face here, Arthur? Shouldn't you be out on a farm somewhere, shuffling shit?" All 3 of them started to laugh at the obscene joke that, as I now realized, Mike had cracked. As my thoughts spun, I realized that I knew all 3 of the students in front of us. They had all been part of the game that I played after all. Mike Denver, the rude and obnoxious noble who used a fire-based manual to fight. The green-haired underling of Mike was John Stewart, who used a wind-based manual. Lastly, the blonde short girl was Bellatrix Rue, an archer. They dare talk shit about Arthur. "I will fuck you up." Chapter 10, Trouble Brews 2. My main consciousness was flung back into my room, sitting in a cross-legged position on my bed as a result of my clone having been busy meditating. Unfortunately, I couldn't summon my clone again as I was almost completely out of mana. As stated before, the main drawback to my manual was the immense mana cost of using the skills. Just using swap had cost me what felt like half of my current mana. Double Trouble cost even more than that. Not that it really mattered all that much to me right now. I was already content with the progress I had made today. Something I was less pleased with was the fact that my hard-earned bus was now completely gone as I had switched bodies. So instead of using the night fully, I made my mind up. I went to bed. "Sophie's poff, I will fuck you up." Rage was surging through me, with the 3 brats in front of me being the reason. Not wanting to hear another word coming out of their mouths, I took a step forward. "Are you guys done?" I thought we were at a restaurant, and I am pretty sure that most of them don't allow animals. Their laughter disappeared as they needed a couple of seconds to understand what I had said. Finally, Mike opened his mouth, uttering even more profanities. "You bitch. What the fuck did you call us? Who even are you?" His last question was a valid one. Hell, even I didn't know who I was in this world. What I did know, though, was that I was someone who wouldn't tolerate them talking shit about Arthur. "You will know that tomorrow. Now please leave before I talk to the manager of this restaurant and make him throw you out." The 3 of them flinched, surprised that I chose to threaten them with something reasonable instead of continuing to lower myself to throw insults at them. "Fuck, fine. We will leave. Be happy, Arthur. Now you finally have someone that can protect your sorry ass." As they turned around to walk away, I tried to contain my anger, but it was futile. "Hey, if you so desperately want to fight, let's fight. A 2v2 duel right now." "Sophie, are you sure that's a good idea?" Looking at the pitiful man at my side, I couldn't help but question the affection that I had for him. "I guess I'll have to whip him into a real man." It wasn't enough for me to give up on him, especially when I knew that he would become the most powerful out of all of us in the future. It's fine, Arthur. You aren't weak. Even if you are, you can't just let them step on you like this. Show some spine. You are the one who always talks about becoming strong, and that's not going to happen if you continue to act all weak. As Arthur opened his mouth to respond to my pep talk, his eyes now burning with resolve, Mike interjected with a sinister smile. Sure. Let's do it. Follow me and we will go to the grounds. Bella, go get a teacher so they can be the judge of our duel. Sure. Following Mike and John, we quickly made our way to the training grounds, stepping into a familiar white circle like the one me and Arthur had been using during our spars. As we were all, strangely enough, wearing training wear, there was no need to go and get changed before our duel. While we were having a stare down with our enemies, with Arthur clearly not getting the memo, the blonde slut returned with an unenthusiastic teacher in tow. So, you guys want to duel even before classes start? Fine. What are the stakes of the duel? This wasn't something that I had thought about at all, mostly because I didn't know that duels had stakes. Before I could find a reasonable demand, Mike stated theirs. If we win, we want both of them to withdraw from the academy. It was an incredibly harsh stake. Bizarre even. Now what I had been thinking of felt pretty lame in comparison, though when I reminded myself that they were just hot-headed douchebags, I didn't feel so bad anymore. We accept. In return, we want them to stay away from Arthur during our years at the academy. Wait, Sophie. An exasperated Arthur tugged at my hoodie, desperately trying to make me change my mind. It's all right, Arthur. We will win. Maybe it was because of the confidence my voice carried, but with those words, he collected himself and his face was painted with determination. Okay, I trust you. Do you accept their demand? Mike took a step forward to show his motivation. We accept. Okay, now that the stakes are settled, I am forced to tell you the rules. You win if you manage to make both members of the other team either forfeit or unable to continue fighting. If I see that a lethal attack is going to connect, I will physically stop the attack and declare the one who would get killed as unable to continue fighting. The rules were pretty brutal. Not a single word about fighting fair or avoiding sensitive spots. They probably have some really good healers here. Dismissing the small wave of anxiety, I made myself ready to fight the brats in front of me by transforming my hands. Fight. Without hesitation, I quickly activated Draconic Enhancement to empower myself and dashed to the now staff-wielding pair, with my focus being on Mike. Arthur followed suit but, noticing where I was looking, instead locking onto John. Surprised by the speed of my approach, Mike didn't even have the time to enact a spell before I swung my hand towards his neck. Bam! Arg! Somehow, he managed to react in time, raising his staff to block, but because of the force behind my attack, he was blown away into the ground. Not giving him time to fix his position, I dashed to him once again. Fireball! A red circle had appeared in front of him and, while still lying on the ground, a ball of fire was sent out at me. Once again, my instincts took over. Instead of dodging, I swept the fireball with both of my scaly paws, disintegrating it in the air. What kind of dragon would be afraid of fire? The next second, I was on top of the little shit and I let my right hand fly towards his throat. Before it could connect, I felt a hand on my arm, keeping it back. The red hair is out because of a lethal attack. The teacher had stopped me before I took his life, something I didn't even think about as I launched my attack. I was too focused on bringing my enemy down. Getting to my feet, I turned my head to see how my darling was faring. Arthur had a much more exciting fight than me, with John pretty skillfully manipulating winds to keep him at bay by shooting blades of air at him while at the same time repositioning using, what I assumed to be, some kind of skill. Looking at the golden boy now, his weak and pitiful appearance was completely gone. Instead, it had been replaced by a handsome and resolute man who knew what he had to do. Although I can't say that I enjoyed seeing his handsome face bleeding from getting scratched by one of John's spells. No, don't interrupt. This is Arthur's fight. If he loses, I will still be able to clean it up after. Once again, Arthur tried to approach the green-haired man, skillfully dodging the barrage of compressed air that flew toward him. Suddenly, The barrage just stopped. Fuck. I'm out of mana. John's words were the signal that this fight was over, with Arthur quickly dashing to him and slicing horizontally towards his midriff. Just as what happened to me, the teacher somehow made it there in time to stop the attack. The green hair is out because of a lethal attack. The Amazon and the fuckboy wins. What did you say? What do you mean? The teacher just gave me a lazy look as if telling me I don't give a fuck, you know. Luckily, Arthur quickly made his way to me and managed to calm me down with his boyish excitement at our win. We did it, Sophie. We won over nobles who have gotten the best resources to get stronger from the moment they were born. Arg. In the distance, I could hear a pained grunt from Mike as he realized what Arthur had just innocently stated. Letting my face warp into a warm smile, I just let him bask in the afterglow with his sweaty, sexy. Let him celebrate. With this duel concluded, there was only one thing left for me to do before going to bed. James, you fuck. Just wait until I get my hands on you. Aku. Rubbing my nose after my sudden sneeze, I couldn't help but feel anxious for some reason. I had been trying to sleep for a long time now, but it just didn't come to me. Checking the time, which wasn't even 11 p.m. yet, I decided that maybe some tea would help me soothe my restless mind. Knock, knock, knock. Just as I was about to start the electric kettle, a familiar sound emerged from my door, accompanied by imaginary boss music. Fuck. Comment 5. Comment. Vote 2 left. Send gift. Chapter 11, Trouble Brews 3. This wasn't good. I was certain that I knew who stood behind my door right now. It was most likely a very big and very angry lady that wanted to rip me to pieces because of my betrayal. My mind worked fast and I quickly summoned my clone and made him hide in the practice room before I walked to my door. There had been yet another fatal flaw in one of my otherwise perfect plans. I just didn't think that Sophie would have the gall to walk into the guys' dormitory this late at night without caring if someone saw her. Damn those extroverts and their disregard for feeling ashamed about not following social norms. Opening the door, I was met by exactly what I expected, a furious Sophie with eyes shining with anger. Oh, hello the lovely lady. What brings you to my humble abode this late at night? Are you perhaps here to try and seduce me? Please do know that. Shut up and let me in. Not wanting to anger the tall woman, I just turned myself around and walked back into my apartment, showing her that she was welcome to join me. I was just making some tea. Do you want some? It's some kind of special chamomile that is supposedly really good for making one feel calm and serene. Please just shut up. But yes, I would love some. She sat down on one of the 2 chairs that accompanied my small kitchen table and stared daggers into my back as I was preparing our drinks. Here you go. Thanks. You traitor. While I was taking my seat in front of her, I wanted to say that I felt a bit guilty. Sadly, I did not. This meant that I only had one choice left, to use my glib tongue to try and smooth things out. So, I guess you are mad at me? Wasn't my little magic trick pretty cool? She froze while looking at me like I was an idiot. After a couple of seconds of silence, she finally regained her verbal footing. Are you retarded? You left us alone forcing us to deal with those bastards. My glib tongue had failed me. Fine. I'm sorry about leaving you, but I really couldn't help it. Raising her brows a bit, she seemed intrigued and irritated by my words. What do you mean? Weren't we in the same position at the bar? If one were to look at our situation externally, it might look like we were in similar positions, but when one started to look deeper, we truly weren't. Let me ask you, and no, you don't have to tell me the exact manual you chose. What star grade does your manual have? A bit confused about why I was asking her this, her eyes slightly mellowed out. 7 stars, of course. Just like yours, right? And this is why our situations were different. As of right now, you can regard my manual as a 1 star at most. In other words, I'm really weak. It did hurt my pride to admit that the Trickster of Death was currently just a weakling with an idiot clone, but it was the truth. Sophie's eyes widened at my words, clearly understanding that I had for some reason chosen an ungraded manual. But why? Why didn't you just choose a 7-star like me and get overpowered? I just beat that stupid Mike like it was nothing, all thanks to having the Dragoon manual. Ah, moron. Once again she couldn't stop herself from telling me too much, now even revealing what manual she had chosen. Crossing her arms and pouting, she tried to cover up her blunder with an excuse. You would have known anyway, as I have to transform a part of my body to fight. So I figured I might as well tell you now. You honestly don't have to lie, you know. It's fine, I have no intentions of becoming your enemy anyway. Even though I tried to help her get over her little mistake, she was still pouting. Cute, but it would be cuter if she wasn't towering over me. Anyway, that's the reason I left. I can't risk getting targeted by prideful nobles who want to make my life a living hell. Not right now, at least. Raising her head, she looked at me with piercing eyes. I understand. But what? If that was all there was to it, why did you do your little theatrical play of yours while carrying a huge grin? Silence enveloped us. I now knew that she knew that the biggest reason I left was that I thought it would be cool. In fact, I had already decided that I was going to take my leave that way to make sure to plant the thoughts that I could teleport into both of them, swap, and retrieve clone. Puff. With a puff of smoke, I disappeared from the kitchen table and was now hiding behind the weapon rack in my practice room. Unfortunately, it didn't take more than 10 seconds before the angry lady opened the door and entered the room, quickly laying her eyes on my hiding figure. Knowing that she had caught me, I rose to my feet and spoke with a dignified tone. How did you know? My plan was perfect. One of her veins seemed ready to burst because of my serious voice. What do you think? If you, an extreme introvert, suddenly disappear, would you think that she would have gone outside, or would he have hidden inside his apartment somewhere? Good point. And the rest is history. Painful history which ended in several bruises and me getting to see the all-worthy partial transformation symbolizing the Dragoon manual. Unfortunately, I got to see those blue scales very closely. The day had finally arrived. The day where I would be forced to leave the safety of my home. The day where I would finally become a man. So, clone me. Be sure to pay attention to whatever the teachers talk about today. Okay? We must do well in this academy after all. I hate myself. I know, I do too. And with that, I was off to the races, making my way to the first homeroom class of the year. It wasn't all bad though. I had luckily gotten placed into the B class, which meant that I didn't have to fear getting bullied by nobles quite as much. If I remembered correctly from the game, there were at least 3 out of 8 students in that class who were commoners, excluding me. Wait. If I am going to attend the B class, wouldn't that mean that one of the students lost their place? As I was distracting myself with irrelevant thoughts as a way to not feel bad about being around other people as much, I continued my internal musing. And what if Sophie also gets placed into the B class? Would that mean that one of the previous students would go up to the A class, or did the gods somehow just eradicate their presence completely? They were interesting thoughts, irrelevant to me, but interesting nonetheless. Before I knew it, I was standing in front of a classroom that had a sign which said 1B. In other words, this was my homeroom from now on. Here goes nothing. Sliding the door open, I was met by a classroom full of students, as well as a gorgeous lady in front of a big digital whiteboard. Our teacher was a complete knockout. A perfect hourglass-shaped body, long dark hair which seemed to carry the softness of a cloud, and an incredibly well-put face adorned with a small nose and puffy lips. Adding on her tight, black skirt and white shirt, she made my head go completely blank. Mr. Jackson, are you listening to me? Oh, shit. Yes, beautiful lady. I'm listening. Streams of laughter started to escape the mouths of my fellow kids, the opposite of the reaction that my lovely teacher had. Go and sit your ass down already. You are 20 minutes late, for Thea's sake. Yes, Mom. Not wanting to anger my goddess anymore, I quickly made my way to the only empty seat left in the room, which was, thank the Lord, right in the corner next to the windows. Looking around, I couldn't help but be impressed by the modern facility we were using. A digital whiteboard, a podium equipped with interactive projections, and every single desk adorned with a built-in keyboard that connected to the smartwatches. Unfortunately, as I scanned the room, I couldn't help but be reminded that I was stuck with 7 other students, most of which I couldn't recall their names. Though there were 2 that I knew pretty well. One was Arthur, sitting in the front like the good boy he was, and the other one was a silver-haired beauty that was sitting in the middle of the room. The elven princess who, oddly enough, didn't manage to make it to the A class, going against what I had learned in the game. I guess the god did tell us that this world wasn't completely like the game. Still, it made me a bit anxious, as one of the conjunctions that could be made was that maybe my manual wouldn't work as it did in the game either. Thankfully, I could calm my nerves by thinking about how it had been pretty much identical so far. Suddenly, my thoughts got interrupted by an angry, shrill, but still oh so sweet, voice. Mr. Jackson, are you going to introduce yourself or not? You are the last one. Quickly standing up, I tried to fix the nasty situation that my clouded head had created. I'm sorry, Mum. I'll begin right away. Her face crumbled. Mum, I hate my life. Comment 6. Vote 2 left. Send gift chapter 12. Sorry, Mum. Another round of laughter was going through the room once more after my little verbal error. I meant to say ma'am. I'm deeply sorry, Mrs. Sorry, what was your name again? Oh, for God's sake. First of all, it's Miss Turner. I'm not married. Secondly, just get on with your damn presentation already. Miss Turner looked like she was just about to explode in anger, a dark aura already enveloping her attractive figure, almost making me question if it was actually her who would become the Reaper who would descend onto the mortal world. Yes, my name is James Jackson. I like reading and playing games. My favorite food is James. I didn't even get halfway through my introduction before my teacher stopped me, reaching yet another level of anger. What did I do wrong? Have you been listening at all to what I have been saying? It didn't take many microseconds before I realized that I was probably in some deep shit right now. I had, in fact, not heard a word about what she had been saying, nor did I hear a single student introducing themselves, as I had been stuck in my own thoughts. There's no helping it, is it? There was no going back from this now. The only thing I could do was face the future straight on, and so, as a real man would do, I let go of my connection with my clone. Poff. Where did he go? How did he do that? Murmurs went around the room, everyone surprised that I had just gone up in smoke, probably incredibly impressed by my cool little trick. Everyone except for one person. James Jackson. After about an hour of meditating, I had finally regained enough mana to call on my clone once more. Now sitting face to face with me on my bed, both of me were in very sour moods. It's okay, man. We did our best. Yay. It just hurts, man. It hurts so bad. I hugged myself, letting a couple of tears fall as I thought about just how socially inept I truly was. After just a little bit of time of doing a comedy skit with myself, I got on with my day and, once again, my main body got busy meditating while my clone went to further improve on our sitemanship. Sophie's Poff. Looking around my homeroom, I couldn't help but feel a bit sad that I wasn't placed in the same class as Arthur or James. Luckily, I had at least one other person here that I knew and had talked with a bit at the girls' dorms. Anna Dubois, an incredibly cute girl who could be said to be a bit of a bookworm. Looking to my side, where she was sitting, I couldn't help but feel a bit envious of her doll-like stature. She was just about the same height as James, with light brown hair and big eyes, adorned with some elegant glasses. The one thing she didn't have going for her was that her body was carrying a pretty big absence of curves, making her the opposite of me. Now, settle down, please. I know that you are all excited for your first year here, but please do contain yourselves until later. Mr. Brown, our homeroom teacher, who was a big, burly man, neatly dressed in a black suit, stood in front of us and guided us through our first class of the year. Now, let's start with introductions. To make it easy, we will just start in front and then make our way to the back of the class. Little lady, would you care to begin? The student he was referring to was Anna, who on cue stood up and spoke with confidence. Hi everyone, I'm Anna Dubois. My combat role is a mage. A pleasure to meet you all. It was quite impressive how that small girl was so confident in talking in front of us all, even more so when I knew that I was the only one she had been speaking to at the academy. Well done, clear and concise, you all. Please do follow the lead of Miss Dubois here when you are making your presentations and we will get through it quickly. Now then, It's your turn, little. I mean, it's your turn, miss. I guess I'm not a little lady in his eyes. Can't really blame him though. Standing up, I always carried myself with as much confidence as I could. Hi, my name is Sophie Red. In battle, I am a close physical damage dealer. Hope we can all get along. And like this, we continued to go around the room, with everyone introducing themselves. Adam Rue, the nice and pleasant twin of Bellatrix, a grey-haired youth with a slightly skinny, yet still athletic body, who told us he was an assassin. Then we had the trio of douches in the form of Mike, John, and Bellatrix, who had tried to bully Arthur as soon as they saw him. Looking closer, even though I disliked them, they were all pretty good-looking, with Bella standing out the most with her larger-than-average curves. The next in line was Sarah Lint, the royal heir to the Kingdom of Mensch. She was an incredibly beautiful girl, with golden blonde hair and a delicate yet still very seductive body. Though she was, as we all were, currently dressed in very casual clothes which helped keep her beauty to a more normal level. Sarah was also a healer, something that was somewhat rare and incredibly sought after in this world. After all, no one wanted to die. She carried herself with extreme dignity, her whole form screaming royalty as she spoke. Greetings. My name is Sarah Lint. Please do not mind the fact that I am the royal heir. In the academy we are all the same. In combat, I bear the role of a healer. Let's work together to make our years here worthwhile. The last student in our class was a complete edgelord. My name is Peter Harrow, but you may call me the Harrower. I bring destruction onto my enemies by using the power of death. That's great. You may sit down now. I couldn't help but feel incredibly sad as my eyes were scanning the young man. Clad in complete black with black hair covering one of his eyes, it was such a complete waste. If one looked more carefully at the man, he was incredibly handsome, even to the extent of rivaling Arthur. Sadly, his persona completely ruined whatever attraction any sensible woman could ever feel for him. So, now that we have gotten through our introductions, I want us all to go to the stadium designated for freshmen to show each other a few of our skills and abilities so you have a better grasp on your classmates before you start going on dungeon dives and excursions. Standing up, me and Anna walked side by side to the designated location that was now inputted into our smartwatches. Walking next to the petite girl did make me feel even more self-conscious about my height, but it also served as good practice for me to get used to my situation. After walking through the academy grounds for a couple of minutes, we arrived at our destination where the B class had already arrived. Scanning the youths, there was something amiss. No matter how I counted, there were only 7 students there instead of 8, with the one missing being James. What did you do this time? When my eyes locked onto Arthur, he noticed me and waved back with his lovely signature smile, once again melting my heart. Should I just kidnap him while he is weak? No. Get it together, woman. Sophie, did you say something? Oh, no, Anna. It was nothing. As I shook my head and forcefully exorcised my inner demons, we continued with our day, separating from the B class and showing each other a bit of what we could do, which in my case was just my body enhancement without showing my transformation. James's POF. It turned out to be a pretty great day after all. Who could have thought that as long as I didn't go to class, it was all good? Having finished yet another massive session of exercise and meditation, I dragged myself to the fridge and withdrew a packet of pre-cooked chicken, put it on a plate, and took my seat at the small table next to the kitchen area. My clone also took the seat in front of me, and we let the food silence our mouths, or at least one of my mouths. And right at that moment, I remembered one of the theories that I had thought of earlier. Without my having to speak, my clone also went to the fridge and mimicked my earlier actions, now also eating some pre-cooked chicken. The theory was simple. If I had 2 bodies, couldn't both of them acquire nutrients to make my intake of food even more effective as well? Even though a body would have a limit on the number of calories and protein it could use during the span of a day, wouldn't 2 bodies have double the limit? It would be hard to see immediate results, but I was determined to keep experimenting with it. Knock, knock, knock. Once again, it appeared that I have company. Is that Sophie again? Shouldn't she be out socializing and getting to know her classmates like a normal person? Can't be helped, I guess. Making my clone wander into my practice room, making sure that he brought his plate with him to make sure I didn't look like a sloth who kept dirty dishes around. I went ahead and opened the door. Surprisingly, I wasn't met by the big, pink-haired girl. Instead, a black-haired, gorgeous lady was standing there, eyes looking like they could kill. "Mr. Jackson, please explain what happened today." Chapter 13, Miss Turner 1. Please explain what happened today. The woman wasn't happy. In fact, she was incredibly unhappy, pissed off, even angry as fuck. One could even say, "Okay, want to come in and sit down? I'll make some tea." I felt like I was making a pretty big mistake to invite the furious woman into my home, but I couldn't help myself. Firstly, it wasn't polite not to invite her in. Secondly, I wasn't one to say no to having a gorgeous lady keep me company. With a sigh, she resigned herself and accepted my proposal. "Fine, I'll have some." Accompanying each other into my humble abode, I quickly put away the plate that I had been eating on and started the kettle. "Did you really eat here instead of the cafeteria? You know that this academy carries the highest level of food preparation in the world, right?" Miss Turner couldn't quite get her head around the fact that I chose not to eat at one of the best facilities in the world. It didn't feel right to burden her with my secrets, thus I made the choice to bring out my hidden technique once more. I lied. "I am too busy training. I don't want to waste any time while I'm at the academy. We only get one chance after all." Trying my very best to keep a serious face, I met her eyes head on, not budging for a second as I placed one of the cups of tea I made in front of her. Somehow, it appeared to work as her stiff face softened a bit and her eyes changed from anger to that carrying, what I assumed to be, pity. "I understand." She stood up and started to walk away as she spoke, "but you are not allowed to skip class anymore." "Don't get me wrong, I do understand the choice you made today, but I promise you that attending classes will be worth your time. See you tomorrow, Mr. Jackson." And just like that, she was gone. What just happened? Jessica Turner's paw leaning back into my comfy armchair at my spacious apartment. I couldn't help but think back at what had happened during this first day of the semester as I was scratching Mr. Fluffy on the underside of his chin. At first, I had been so incredibly angry at the fact that one of the elite students of the academy would dare to carry such an aloof and idiotic way of acting. On the first day even, my perception of James had been the lowest it could have been when he somehow just escaped from the classroom. Though it had to be said that it was impressive for someone that young to carry the ability to teleport, it made me furious that he just ditched class like that. The more I thought about it, the more I was certain that he had to be the hidden heir of one of the hidden families. How could he otherwise be so adept with his manual that he learned to bend space and time? Making up my mind, I decided that I would put him in his place before he would act out even more. So I went to his apartment to talk to him. When he opened the door, I could see the same fake nervousness that he had in class. It made me even angrier thinking about the fact that he was playing with me. However, as he talked about how he had spent his day, his face changed. No longer was it a fake face full of deceit, it was a face of resolution. He was now a young man with a clear goal in mind, a goal that he wouldn't let anyone oppose. It was obvious that he truly came from a hidden family, and from the limited knowledge I had about them, I couldn't help but pity the kid. A lot of the hidden families used inhuman practices to make sure their heirs were as strong as possible, something that a lot of the time ended in their doom. I can't imagine what he went through to throw his academic life away just to have an excuse to keep to himself and train. Unfathomable. It was just incomprehensible that he made the choice to throw away all chances at making friends just to make himself look like a fool so he could focus on his training in solitude. I have to help him. I can't let him go through these 3 years without making some kind of emotional connection. With my hand still stroking Mr. Fluff, I let my head fall backward, just staring into the ceiling as I resolved myself to not let that pitiful kid waste his youth. Sophie's paw. Hey, Sophie. Are you sure we shouldn't have tried to invite James? I mean, he must also have liked to make some more friends here, right? Arthur, Anna, and the princess herself were currently eating dinner in the cafeteria, enjoying an incredible assortment of different meats and potatoes. After we had shown each other a tiny bit of our abilities, which was pretty much every skill that we currently had, Sarah started to talk to us. proposing to eat together to strengthen our bonds. What she didn't know was that Arthur was also part of our clique, which at first made her a bit uncomfortable. He was a commoner, after all. Though it didn't take long for her to ease up after getting exposed to the joy that is the hero. "Who is James?" the princess asked with a curious expression, most likely interested in what other common friend we could have already made this early into the semester. Arthur jumped to the gun, excited to talk about one of his idols. "Oh, he is a really cool guy. Although he spends most of his time training, he is incredibly wise and polite." "Is that really the same James that I know?" Not wanting to destroy the image of James that Arthur had, I kept mum about the dark secrets he carried. "He is just another friend." "James is also in the B class like Arthur, but, as Arthur said, he spends most of his time alone because he is pathetic." Sarah's eyes lit up a bit, getting even more intrigued about this wise and passionate man who spent all his time trying to grow stronger. "Is that so? Then I guess he will soon become part of the A class, I assume." "It would be nice to see this young man someday. He seems like a delight." It was hard to know if she really was a teenager or if she was just an old woman in disguise. Her way of speaking was so incredibly stale that it made me uncomfortable, and therefore I decided to try my best to change it. "Sarah, no need to talk like that with us. As you said before, in the academy we are all the same, right? No need to speak like you are surrounded by stuck-up nobles." She flinched a bit at my words, almost as if she instantly realized her mistake. "Oh, sorry. I am just not used to." Feeling my brows rising, I didn't understand what she was saying. "Used to what?" Her face turned down towards the table as she explained herself. "I'm not used to being around what I would call friends." As we let a couple of seconds of silence wash over the table, my thoughts quickly made a pretty accurate assumption. "I guess we are all misfits here, after all." My beloved quickly went into action, trying to cheer the pouting girl up. "Don't worry, Sarah. We are all friends here, right? Let's try to just have fun and grow as much as possible during our years here." Seeing my darling act so friendly towards the beautiful princess made my heart clench in envy, and I couldn't help but glare at Sarah to wordlessly tell her that, "He is mine, you got it?" Noticing the look I gave her, she replied with an almost invisible nod that showed me that she understood. Continuing our delicious meal, we spent our time talking about what we expected from the academy, what we wanted to do and what classes we were planning on taking. All in all, it was a great time. "I wonder what that stupid hermit is doing?" "James is poff." I had done all I could before the semester started for real. I had already figured out, with the help of the glorious internet, what would happen during our first day. That was actually one of the main reasons why I had decided to ditch class even before my accidental social suicide. There wasn't a single thing that I could show my classmates right now, except for the little teleportation trick. Hopefully, it had planted the idea that I was just a weakling who was able to teleport, at most useful as a porter. Having now spent 4 days training hard, I was kind of excited to look at my status once more. Status equals name, James Jackson. Rank, E strength, F plus agility, E stamina, E intelligence, E plus mana capacity, D dash greater than main manual. Trickster, ungraded, minor understanding and ungraded manual for those who don't want to be understood. A trickster is only a trickster until people understand your tricks. Core skill, double trouble. First skill, swap dash greater than side manual, empty equals. I had already managed to break through another minor rank, most likely thanks to the fact that I was doing double the training simultaneously. My strength had also increased a minor step, going from F to F+, while my mana capacity had gone from D to D. I wasn't sure exactly how good my progress had been. I was confident that it was an impressive feat for a freshman to already reach the middle of E rank. I also had a feeling that my understanding of my manual was about to progress as well, going from minor understanding to a medium understanding, which would let me unlock another skill. I just have to keep on going. Comment 2. Vote 2 left. Send gift. Chapter 14, Miss Turner 2. I was back in the room where I had made a fool out of myself, with most of the other students giggling like teenagers when I arrived. It did make some sense though. In this world, we were only 17 years old, though in the eyes of society we were already fully fledged adults. Luckily I had been able to, with my amazing spatial perception and awareness, at least manage to learn the names of my classmates by using yet another secret technique. Eavesdropping. On the front row, there was Arthur and a girl named Suzanne, with a well-developed, although slimmer than average, body and bright yellow hair. Behind them were two guys, bald twins who were both built like bodybuilders. From a glance, they were probably the same height as Arthur, but because of their imposing size, they felt a lot bigger. The only difference was that the one named Brad had a scar over his left eye while the one named Bradley didn't. On the next row of seats was the elven princess, Adriana Alden, carrying the same name as the country she was supposed to rule in the future, and another girl named Tricia, called a tall but incredibly flat girl with dark hair. In my eyes, a complete extra when compared to the princess. Lastly, we had the guy was sitting in the back row with me, a strong, silent type with purple hair who looked a lot like someone I would assume to be Arthur's rival in the game, if not for the fact that he had been placed in the B class. His name was Sebastian. One of the biggest demerits of me attending this class was that I couldn't remember most of the characters as they weren't relevant to the story. Do keep in mind that I only played the game for a week. Yes, I did play for more than 100 hours. But most of that time I spent grinding EXP while skipping the lore. Today you are going to get to choose the 4 courses that you will attend during your first year. Do keep in mind that your schedule might change depending on if there are events to be had. We all got sent a list of possible courses to choose from to our watches. Elemental alignment class, herbalism, basic combat. There were so many to choose from that it almost made me a bit dizzy. As I was scrolling through the list, I was keeping in mind the requirements that I had before choosing a course. The first requirement was obvious: the class had to be suited to my future vision of surviving and becoming a real trickster. Secondly, I didn't want to have to reveal my tricks before I had awakened the second skill of my manual, a skill that would help me immensely to keep on fooling everyone around me. Thirdly, I didn't want to attend the same courses as the idiot of a hero. As soon as you have chosen your courses, you are free to leave. Remember that you will be attending your different classes on an A and B schedule. Every other day will be an A day where you attend one class in the morning and the other after lunch. The B day will be the same, only that you will attend the other 2 courses that you have chosen. It was a pretty simple, yet effective, system. Shortly after she had stated the last bit of information that we needed, almost all of my classmates stood up and began to exit the room, with me, Arthur, and Adriana being the exceptions. I had already chosen 3 courses and all them were pretty clear-cut for me. First, a mana cultivation course, secondly, a mana manipulation course, and finally, a physical training course, which was basically just weightlifting. Although I didn't know to what extent mana manipulation might come in handy, I figured that because this was reality, there might be a lot of things I could learn by using mana. The last choice, however, was incredibly difficult to make. I desperately wanted to pick the basic combat course, where I would get to practice using my scythe. But there was one major problem. It felt embarrassing to show everyone my clumsy way of handling my weapon. Even if I had come a long way from where I started during these few days, I was still miles away from being able to use it in actual combat. In the end, I chose yet another magic-based course, the Elemental Alignment course, where you could try to awaken an inherent element that could augment your manual. There was a clear difference between using an elemental manual and having an inherent element. Most of the time, these would align, like in the case of Mike, who had an inherent affinity for fire and used a fire-based manual. However, this was not always the case, as some nobles got forced into using a manual that didn't fit their affinity because of the traditions of the family. Sometimes, one could even have more general mage manual, but, because of their affinity, they would specialize in using one element. In the case of someone like Sophie, who used a physical-based manual, they could use their element to augment their attacks even more. It would look pretty cool if she could set those blue dragon paws on fire. In the game, these affinities would come in the form of trinkets that you equipped your character with, but in this world, it was inherent traits that one was born with. Also, I hadn't cared much about it in the game as my Trickster manual and my side manual had been good enough on their own. That reminds me, I wonder how I will get my hands on my side manual. The Trickster manual in itself wasn't strong, and although it wasn't weak either, its strength was mostly based on what side manual the user had. On Earth, I had used a pretty unique manual that complemented the Trickster immensely and made full use of the high intelligence stat and agility. Thankfully, the Spellblade manual was only a 3-star manual, meaning that although it wasn't that common, it wasn't that rare either. "James, are you alright, huh?" Snapping out of my thoughts, I was met by a worried Arthur who, apparently, had tried to talk to me for some time already as I was lost in thought. "Do you have a fever or something? Did you train too much for your body to handle? He truly is like a puppy or something." Frankly, I found the man quite repulsive. His genuine care for other people and his glowing demeanor sent shivers down my spine. "I'm fine." "If you are done with choosing your courses, shouldn't you get going?" Although I might have been a bit too blunt in my approach to get him to leave me alone, that wasn't the way he construed my words. "You are right. There is no time to waste after all." "Thank you, James. I'll send a text to Sophie right now to see if she wants to train with me." He turned around and quickly made his exit. However, just as he was leaving, Adriana chose to leave as well. "Is she interested in Arthur?" Now, with me being the only one left, I was making myself ready to disconnect this clone body of mine and continue my training again. This time, my main body was doing physical exercises and practicing the scythe as I felt bad about forcing clone me to do it every day. "Mr. Jackson, would you mind staying for a bit?" Miss Turner approached me with an aloof face, a face that I couldn't quite get a read on. Most of the time, it was quite easy for me to read the emotions of other people, a skill I had picked up in order to avoid unnecessary trouble. However, her face right now was an enigma. "Yes, I guess I have some time." After all, I was already training my ass off at home. Having reached my desk, she took another chair and sat down. "Good. I just wanted to talk to you for a bit." "Okay." I didn't understand what she wanted at all. Was she here to reprimand me for yesterday, or did she have some other goal in mind? Maybe she fell for my irresistible charms. Clasping her hands together and putting them on the desk, she explained her purpose. "James, I can see that you are hurting yourself. There is no need to be so desperate just to grow stronger. You are young. You should live life, find friends, and maybe even someone to love." Does she know that I can barely sit down to take a shit because of my never-ending muscle soreness? Playing it cool, I retraced my steps to act like I just wanted to try my best at the academy, like a diligent commoner who got the chance to study at the academy. "Miss Turner, I only have one chance here. There are no second chances for me. Therefore, I have to try my best. After all, my future is dependent on it." Suddenly, she just took a stand and turned away from me. I understand, James. Just promise me that you will talk to me if you need help." And then she walked away, leaving me scratching my head in confusion. She is one strange lady, isn't she? Gorgeous but strange. Having, very suddenly, concluded my business for the day, I dismissed the clone and spent the rest of the day training once more. Comment 1. Vote 2 left. Send gift. Chapter 15. Let's go to class. 1. Jessica's path. I walked quickly, trying my best to keep the tear ducts in my eyes from bursting. It didn't take long for me to find my way back to the apartment, throwing myself on the couch where I could finally let go of my restraints. That's just so damn sad. That poor James, being forced by his family to grow stronger if he wants to keep on living." His words haunted me, making me feel awful right down to my core. Hearing how he had bravely told me about how he had to perform to live on shocked me. Him telling me he would have no second chances, that this was the only chance he had to live. Unable to contain myself, I threw a pillow in the wall, creating an explosion of feathers. Fuck those hidden families. It was awful, but there was nothing I could do. The underworld of our society was too strong, with a lot of the houses having several monstrous people under them. Just last year a noble house got completely eradicated because they managed to piss off one of the hidden families. There was not a single survivor, Meow. Mr. Fluffy came to my rescue, lying down in my lap, waiting for me to give him attention while at the same time calming me down a bit. I just hope that James manages to escape from his horrible fate. He seems too proud to accept help, so I have no choice but to wait and see if he asks for help later on. James is off. Even though I was now surrounded by other students, both from the A class and the B class, I was still pretty excited for my first real class. We were standing in the designated classroom for the mana cultivation class, a big room most reminiscent of a stereotypical dojo from Earth. Looking around, I could see a few familiar faces that had also chosen this class. Mike and John were standing by themselves while the two princesses from the different classes were also doing their own thing. Lastly, we had me and some crazy-looking dude who burst into the room yelling, "Make way for the harrower!" A complete nut job, to be honest. Everyone knows that the coolest is to be a secret in the shadows, after all. Finally, our teacher entered the stage. A small, elderly woman who looked like a gentle granny, with white locks of hair. She took her position in front of us and, as she did, we all turned our attention to the granny. "Welcome to Mana Cultivation 1. This is where you will start your journey to attune your body like instruments towards the wave of energy that is always surrounding us. My name is Katarina Bright and you may call me Mrs. Bright." Our teacher was just adorable. Her first impression was friendly, gentle, and calm, albeit still slightly eccentric. "Now, I want all of you to take on a lotus position and I will start to explain how this course will work." We all sat down, cross-legged, and listened to the words of our instructor. Mana cultivation is, as the name suggests, just learning how to assimilate more mana into your core, as well as to make sure to filter it in order to make it more potent. During this class, you will spend your mornings meditating, gathering, and accumulating mana through your mana channels. The edgelord raised his hand, his face looking confused. "Yes, my dear." "What are mana channels?" "Thank you for asking. I didn't know what they were either, but I didn't want to make myself seem like a fool by asking." Luckily, the emo saved my ass. "Oh, well, mana channels are just that, channels to gather as well as to make mana flow. The more channels you manage to open, the more mana can be absorbed into your bodies as well as allowing you to use it more efficiently. You could imagine it as capillaries but for mana instead of blood." It was such a great answer, leaving no question marks to be had at all. That God could probably learn a thing or two from this woman. Now that you know that, let's begin. Do remember to try your best to actively find your mana channels and open them up one by one. My suggestion is to start in your dominant hand. I will also go around and help guide your mana while you do so. Closing my eyes, I started the same thing I had done for the last few days, with the exception of now also trying to open my mana channels in my right hand. At the same time, my main body also got the same information but instead started to open the channels in my left hand. The fact that I had two bodies was just so incredibly efficient. It pretty much meant that everything would always take half as long for me to do. Then, I felt two hands on my back, sending in an unknown force that guided my mana to a closed mana channel in my hand. "Now, gently but purposefully send your mana through the channel," she told me with a sweet tone. Adhering to her words, I pushed some of my mana into the channel, making it open up and making me feel a minuscule difference in the way my body handled mana. "Good job, dear. Now you only have about 2 million to go." Ho ho ho. The hands left their place on my back and I figures that she went ahead to another student to help them. 2 million. Huh? Guess I better get started. Sophie's pof. I was the only one attending this class, all alone with the instructor who happened to be Mr. Brown, my homeroom teacher. Even though I would have liked to choose my course to have the same classes as Arthur, it would be detrimental to do so. I had to pave my own path, at least when cultivating my strength. "Now then, Miss Red, let's start practicing in bare-handed combat." First of all, the most optimal way of training you would be if you told me what manual you have. That would make it possible for me to construct a personal training program for you, something that is only possible because you are the only student here. Gahaha. It would be a lie to say that it wasn't a bit awkward. At the same time, It was impossible for some courses not to end up with only a single student or even none at all. There were just too few students attending the academy. James had told me that it might be a good idea to keep my manual a secret, but it felt pretty unnecessary as I wouldn't be able to hide it at all as soon as I used Dragon Eyes. I mean, I had already shown it to Mike, John, and Bellatrix. Sure, I have the Dragoon Manual, a 7-star manual that lets me borrow the power of dragons. You have a 7-star manual? Misread. Are you sure about this? The big man got pretty exasperated when I told him the truth, probably never expecting to hear that a freshman had acquired a 7-star manual. Alright. In the game, Arthur was the only one who had a 7-star manual beside the player. Arthur had a Sword of Light or something manual which was incredibly efficient against demons and let him send beams of light that incinerated all his enemies. Thinking that I might have made a mistake, I still thought that there would be no use in hiding it. Yes, I'm sure, and at the same time I transformed my hands into the blue, scale-adorned, dragon paws. Holy crap. You weren't lying. I have only ever heard myths and legends talking about that manual, but here it is, right in front of my eyes. How did you find it? Spouting some bullshit I just made up. I tried to make it seem like I didn't truly know. Well, as you may or may not know, I'm an orphan. It seems like my parents had made me attune to the manual before they died, and thus I have no memory of it. Sorry, Mr. Brown, but I don't know where it came from. Trying my best to look sad and pitiful worked wonders against my teacher as he suddenly started waving his hands and speaking in order to neutralize the situation. Oh, don't worry about it, Sophie. I was just curious after all. Oh, are you sure? Because I truly want to tell you, if only I could. Now, misread, stop that. It's not your fault, so don't blame yourself for it. Who knows? Maybe you can create a new manual when you master it. Now, let's get started with our lesson instead. And with that, he went through some of the basics of hand-to-hand combat with me, how the legs were always the most important as we always used, not only for attacks but also for movement, as well as to generate power when punching. After no more than about 20 minutes of showing me some basic movement and verbal guidance, Mr. Brown already decided that we should begin sparring. The way real warriors grow stronger is by fighting after all. If you wanted to grow stronger by dilly-dallying, you should have chosen that silly mana cultivation class. The classroom, or should I say arena, that we were in was very fitting for sparring, so it didn't take long for us to get going, me now already wearing the student uniform that we had gotten during our first homeroom. A black and golden set of pants, a shirt, and a jacket which was enchanted to be more durable than most leather armors. Chapter 16, Let's Go to Class 2 Again. I dashed with my draconic hands toward my instructor for what felt like the 100th time. As he got into my reach, I started feeling him out again with a couple of jabs, don, which he blocked with ease using his hands. Now, do a 1-2-1-3 combo, he shouted at me, which was pretty easily translated into left jab, straight right, left jab into a right cross. A very traditional boxing combo. Don, bam. I unleashed my attacks as powerfully as I could, only for him to effortlessly catch all my attacks once more. Before I could recover, I felt my legs getting swept from underneath, making me fall to the ground. How many times did I tell you? Don't stop moving. Mr. Brown sounded harsh, even to the point of being mean, but I construed his words as tough love. Even now, having only one session under my belt, I felt like I had gained so much. Unfortunately, it had also opened my eyes as to just how much I still had to learn. Breaking his stiff R-A section aid, my instructor brought out a warm smile. Now, that was all we had time for today. You did great, Red. Red was his nickname for me, as it was a lot easier to say than Sophie during a stressful spar. It's just so sad that my dragon eyes makes me blue. It was truly a tragedy, having Red as my last name but transforming into a blue dragon. Thanks, Mr. Brown. Getting up from the ground, he concluded our session with some words of wisdom. Now, Red, do make sure to try and keep your power at least somewhat hidden. There is no telling how many noble houses might want to kidnap you if they know what manual you have. Oh, and also, Do make sure to ask for a double serving for lunch. Your body will need it. As dark thoughts started to emerge in my head, mostly about the kidnapping thing but also a bit about having to eat a double serving as a lady, I just gave him a quick goodbye and made my way to the cafeteria, still dressed in my sweaty uniform. James's puff stretching my body after sitting down and meditating for 4 hours. I couldn't help but see something that made my skin crawl a bit. All the other students were wearing the same kinds of clothes. They were wearing the official student uniform of INU while I was wearing sweatpants. Did I miss something? Quickly figuring out that they must have gotten their uniforms during our first day of school, I felt my social anxiety creeping up on me again. Young man, are you all right? Looking to my side, Mrs. Bright had noticed my distress and come to my rescue, her appearance completely lifting me from the shackles that started to constrict my soul. If you were only about 70 years younger, I would make you my wife so fast. Actually, make that 80 years. From the looks of it and, from my assumed knowledge of this world, she was probably more than 100 years old. Just as I was thinking this, she slapped my hand. Smack. Ow. Why did you do that? Young man, your thoughts are leaking out, and that's no way to think about a lady. Now, what's bothering you, dear? She calmed down as quickly as she got riled up, getting right back on track to listen to my troubles. Well, I didn't get my uniform, and now it feels really bad thinking about what the other students think of me. Is that it? Are you seriously stressed about just not having gotten your uniform? Mrs. Bright's face was completely blank, unable to comprehend that one of the elite students at INU was panicking over something so ridiculous. Lowering my gaze to the ground in shame, as her words made me understand just how pathetic I sounded, I grit my teeth. Yes, ma'am. I could feel a warm, and wrinkly, hand on my cheek. Dear, you can't be that weak if you are going to stay at the academy. Just go and talk with your homeroom teacher and ask for a uniform. Now, straighten your back and walk proudly. You are a student at INU. Following her orders, and feeling much better about the situation after her pep talk, I stood tall, or at least as tall as I could. Yes, ma'am. Good. Now get out there, son. Give them hell. Although I didn't know why I suddenly felt the urge to play basketball, I walked out of the classroom and let my feet lead me to the cafeteria for lunch, fully focused on completing my mission as fast as possible, eating the delicious food that I had been served. The people around me had for some reason multiplied. There was no longer just Sophie and Arthur here, now they had somehow mimicked amoebas and multiplied themselves, as there were now 2 more individuals. I knew both of them from the game already, Sarah, who was a healer and a princess, and Anna, who was a witch. No, I didn't mean anything bad with that statement. It was just that her manual pretty much made her a witch as she practiced it, letting her learn dark attribute spells and curses. So James, why didn't we get to see you during the first day when we were all gathering in the gymnasium? The princess was the one who asked, most likely because Arthur already assumed I was training and Sophie knew about my personality. Emptying the contents in my mouth, I have a curt answer so that I could continue eating. I was busy training. Sarah was truly a beautiful girl, breathtaking in fact, but because I was surrounded by people, I couldn't appreciate her appearance right now. Is that so? You must be pretty determined if you even risked getting suspended just to continue your training. What she just said caught my attention, as she made apparent yet another flaw in my plans. Alright, this is a center of education. I could get suspended if I do stuff like skipping class. Now wanting to admit that the risk of suspension had been missing from my train of thought, I brought out the best poker face I could muster. If they suspend me for spending my time with reason, then so be it. That just means that INU Academy is not the place I belong. Having finished eating already, I got up and quickly made my way out of the nightmare difficulty dungeon. Sophie's puff TSK. Watching the small man leave us, having finished his food in record time, I couldn't help but click my tongue. What a dork. Does he honestly think that anyone will fall for his bullshit? Sophie, do you have James's number? A somewhat flushed princess just showed some clear signs that she believed what that idiot had said. No, I don't. And you should probably be careful about getting too close to him. Her eyes opened a bit, not understanding what I meant. Why shouldn't I try to get close to him? I mean, he is a little short and skinny, but he was so handsome, and he seems so passionate. Instead of letting me fill in the blanks, the love of my life interjected and derailed her understanding of the man even more. Sarah, it's because he will not have time for you. He is too busy spending all his time improving, training as hard as possible to reach the apex. He even purposefully made a fool out of himself on the first day just to make sure he wouldn't get disturbed. Both of their eyes were currently glowing in awe when they thought about how hard-working James was, how he didn't even fear getting expelled as long as he could continue his training. However, I just got the true answer as to why he wasn't present during our gathering. So he fucked up during class and ran away? Or did he just do that teleportation trick to look cool? No matter what, he is such an idiot. James is pof. Welcome. As you see, we will be holding the mana manipulation class in the same classroom as the cultivation course. My name is Andrew Black and I will be your teacher for the year. The second lesson of my school year had started, this time with manipulation of mana being the addressed subject, having a middle-aged man with a receding hairline as our instructor. The students who took this course were almost the same as the ones who took the cultivation class, with just one exception. The crazy student who called himself Harrower was not present. Although it was a bit awkward to be in the same room as Sarah after my little theatrical display at the cafeteria, I forcefully pushed it to the back of my mind and ignored it. Having already taken the same lotus position as our last course, we were all listening intently to what our teacher had to say. The first exercise that we will practice is a pure form of mana cultivation where you will try and focus your mana throughout your bodies. A lot of manuals have this form of physical enhancement as inherent skills, but with this method, we are able to replicate those skills to a somewhat acceptable level. I could feel the edges of my mouth rising as I listened to his words. What he had just pretty much said was that even though skills were superior, one could manually manipulate mana in order to replicate them. There was not a single fraction of me that didn't believe that this translated to a lot more than just physical enhancements. Catching myself, and restraining my excitement, in both of my bodies, my main body still sitting on my bed, started to practice filling and enhancing one limb at a time with mana. Comment for comment. Vote to left. Send gift. Chapter 17. Let's go to class. 3. It wasn't all that hard to guide my mana throughout my body, from the biggest to even the smallest of muscles, but trying to keep it there, conglomerating and focusing it, felt impossible. With the slipperiness of a snake, it somehow always managed to wriggle out of the designated location, as if it was completely against having its freedom restrained. Thankfully, this was not a technique that needed one's body to get imprinted like with the mana channels. It was all about the feeling, and that was something that I got to experience doubly. After just a bit more than 2 hours, I had finally gotten a somewhat good enough grasp of it. At this point, I could hold my mana and enhance a limb for a bit more than 4 seconds, which was huge progress from when I started. Sadly, my rapid progress came back to bite me in the ass when our teacher noticed it. Oh, seems like we have a bit of a genius on our hands. Most students would need at least 4 to 5 hours of practice before they are able to even start a manual enhancement. Looking up at Mr. Black, I felt like he had completely betrayed the trust that he didn't know I had for him. Couldn't you just keep silent? Fuck. Not caring about my inner thoughts, he kept on speaking loudly. Say, young man, what's your name? I'm James Jackson, sir. Rubbing his cheek, he inspected me thoroughly before opening his mouth again, once more making my life difficult. Well, young James, very well done. The other students could learn a lot from someone like you. As soon as he said that, I could feel a lot of eyes penetrating me, their origins being my fellow students. Little did I know that one of these pairs of eyes was not like the others. 3 of the pairs were staring at me because they felt insulted that someone who they assumed to be a commoner had the audacity to be praised by the teacher, while the last one was contrastingly looking at me with eyes of admiration. As our teacher had already left my side to guide the other 4 students, I once more had to repress a lot of dark thoughts and forced myself to continue practicing. Sophie's pof, this can't be happening. Once again, I was alone with Mr. Brown, back in the same arena I had just left when I went to the cafeteria. I see that you are once again the only one who chose my course. Gahaha. That's great. Yes, somehow I had once again picked a course that not a single other student had picked, this time being the physical enhancement class. This was one of the courses that I had thought that a lot of other students might have picked, as physical enhancement was, in my mind, a basis for a warrior. Having no answer to this mystery, I had to ask, "Sir, why is it that no one else picked this course? Shouldn't there be at least some students who would want to attend it?" In my mind, I had been thinking that, at the very least, Bellatrix and Adam would want to attend this class as it synergized with their combat roles. Mr. Brown's face turned into a bit of a pout, clearly not happy about having to answer my question. Well, most students either choose mana manipulation where they can learn a broader, more general, use of mana which also includes a basic enhancement practice, or they choose the weapon enhancement course which also does the same. In fact, as physical enhancement is one of the basics of mana usage, most students will learn it in a lot of different classes. Therefore this course, which is specifically tailored to teach students to specialize in body enhancements, is often looked over. That was a lot of information to take in, but I got the general gist of it. As all students would automatically have to learn physical enhancement as a basic part of a lot of courses, they would rather make sure that they also got to learn to either use mana more extensively or specialize in using their weapons. I understand. It's fine, I get you to teach me all by myself after all. Seeing the downcast expression of my instructor, I couldn't help but try to cheer him up a bit. Something that appeared to work splendidly as his face immediately lit up with a smile. That's right, Red. I will make you the strongest student in the entire academy. Somehow, I had a feeling that his optimism would quickly get translated into pain for me, but I kept a polite smile on my face to not make him feel bad. James is off. That's all for today. Good work everyone, I'll see you again on Friday. Our lesson finally ended, with me making a bit more progress in the control I had over my mana. With everyone standing up, with me included, I quickly dismissed my clone. When my clone disappeared, my main body, which was still sitting on my bed, had some kind of crazy reaction to the sudden influx of opened mana channels and mental angst after practicing my control with double the efficiency. Arg! I couldn't sit up, my body fell back into the bed, spasming as I felt as if my body had been set on fire. Fuck. It hurts so bad. Although it was nothing in comparison to the pain I had felt when the god remodeled my body, the pain was still so incredibly intense that I had no choice but to grit my teeth to make sure I didn't bite my tongue off. After a couple of minutes, it appeared that all the mana channels I had copied with my clone had been fully integrated into my body, leaving me with an aching body and a tired mind. Guess that's to be expected. I pretty much brute forced all of the channels that my clone opened when we assimilated. The positive thing about this was that I could feel a very real and tangible effect on my body, with my mana flowing a lot smoother than before. The negative thing was that I didn't know if there was a risk of me potentially causing permanent damage to my body by doing this. Even though the upside was great, the downside was way too dire for me to even slightly regard this as a valid alternative in the future. The only alternative I have is to make one body gather and filter mana while the other one focuses on opening mana channels. It was a shame, a complete tragedy, but I couldn't risk losing the ability to grow stronger in the future by gambling on short-term progress. As I was laying down in the bed, I called upon my clone, which emerged from my body in the exact same state as my main body was in. Hey, we look like shit, man. Yay, we sure do. We should probably have thought a bit more about the demerits that this clone thing actually carries. Yay. But we were pretty awesome though. We sure were. Stopping the talk with myself, both of my bodies once again started to circulate and gather mana while we waited for our bodies to be in good enough shape to make some food. Sarah's poff. Hi. Lying down on my bed, filled with stuffed animals and plushies, I couldn't help but giggle when I thought about the man I had gotten to see today. When Arthur had first told me about James, I thought that he might be greatly exaggerating. There were plenty of ambitious students at Ainu, And even if the man turned out to be more determined than the average man, that wouldn't mean all too much. However, those thoughts all changed when I got to meet him in person. First of all, he was handsome. Not handsome in the traditional way but in a more feminine way, something that also translated to his smaller stature. Even though I was pretty sure that I was taller than him, it didn't deter my heart from wavering when I saw someone who was just my type. Then, I also got to see his ambition shine through, as he wolfed down his food as fast as possible just so he could squeeze in some extra training before our next lesson started. I am so lucky I get to see him in both of the lessons I picked. Yes, as if Thea herself told me that it was meant to be, we had picked the same courses to attend, both the mana cultivation and the mana manipulation course. During the mana cultivation, I hadn't really looked at him much, fully focusing on the task at hand. Something I tried to do during the manipulation lesson as well, which worked out well for me during the first half of the session. Alas, my concentration was completely disrupted when the teacher noticed that James had already managed to pull off doing a physical enhancement manually, without the help of a skill in just 2 hours. So cool. And best of all, he seemed really humble about it, not bragging or even speaking a word about his accomplishment at all. Even though my social interactions had been few and far between, there was one thing I was sure of. I was incredibly interested in getting to know the handsome student James as much as possible. Creator's thoughts and tens. Now, I understand that a lot of readers might think that this is very different from my earlier work as it doesn't carry the same dark undertones. What I have to say is just one thing: wait for it. Also, romance is a part of the story but it is merely a catalyst that is used to build more suspense. Cheerios. Comment 6. Vote 2 left. Send gift. Chapter 18. New skill. Sophie's path. My whole body was hurting after my double sessions with Mr. Brown yesterday. Even the physical enhancement course had been incredibly harsh. In my head, it would have been more based on meditating, feeling the flow of mana, and guiding it to the place where I wanted to go. Mr. Brown, however, had a completely different approach to the subject. Instead of letting me slowly get the feel of manipulating the mana, he forcefully injected different limbs with his mana to simulate the sensation of enhancement. The only demerit to this approach was it hurt like hell. It felt like my muscles got torn apart when his energy penetrated them and filled them up. After proofreading these 2 paragraphs, I just want to say, it's not like that, you perverts, though. It was quite effective. At least if I were to believe the words of my teacher. He told me that most students needed between 4 and 5 hours of practicing before they could get a hold of the sensation and make it tangible in their psyche. Contrasting that, I only needed about 2 hours of incredible pain before I could start to manually enhance my body. I did start to have doubts about if I even needed to learn this, as I already had draconic strength which enhanced my whole body. But it turns out that I could add the skill and the manual enhancement together to make my attacks even stronger and more explosive. Why aren't you eating, Sophie? Me and Arthur were currently having breakfast at the cafeteria before our lessons start, but because of the pain, I was feeling I didn't have much of an appetite. Even more so when looking down at the gigantic portion of eggs and toast that I got served. Ahaha. I was just lost in thought for a moment. I didn't want my darling to worry for no reason. It was after all just some muscle aches. Though I had to say that I was impressed by the level of pain tolerance that I gained after coming to this world. Looking at the puppy-eyed and super handsome man, I felt my heart melt into a puddle. He truly was the one for me, no matter what. Suddenly, something extremely unexpected came and interrupted our conversation. May I sit with you? It was that social goblin James, who had, for some reason, deliberately left his cave to come to the cafeteria before class started. What are you doing? My whole body screamed that something was up. There was no way that he came here without something in mind, some kind of goal. I'm training. His face didn't carry the same nervousness that it did the day before at lunch. Somehow, he felt a lot calmer, almost composed, which sent shivers down my back. What are you up to? As I didn't want to make a scene, I decided to keep my mouth shut and temporarily accept his stupid explanation. an explanation that unfortunately seemed to trigger Arthur's fanboy mode. Really? What are you training? Are you practicing using your mana as a sensory tool, or are you trying to learn how to move with some kind of unique movements? Actually, maybe he wasn't the one for me after all. Calming my mind by reminding me that I would get to see him transform from an innocent, weak young boy to a reliable and strong man, I shifted my attention to James, awaiting his response. I'm training something completely different, something unique to me and my inherent traits. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you what that is. And once again, his mouth kept on spouting bullshit. Is that so? Good luck then. I hope that you succeed in whatever you are doing. This boy was too precious for the mortal world to contain, his smile illuminating even the darkest corners of inner self. It was enough for me to not even care about the goblin who sat down beside us. Strangely, he did not even carry a tray of food with him as he took his seat. Aren't you going to eat? A smug smile appeared on his face as he spoke condescendingly. I think I told you, Sophie, I am training. I am not here to eat. Feeling one of the veins on my forehead getting ready to burst, I struggled to keep a smile on my face. You are an idiot, you know that? Before we could continue our little session of banter, Arthur intervened. You guys are such good friends, you must have known each other for a long time. Not really. We pretty much just met right before we started to attend. I knew. I quickly dismissed his faulty preconception as I didn't want anyone to think that I was all that close with this weirdo. Yay, that is the case. By the way, it seems like I will have to leave you guys now. Thanks for your time. Puff, cough, cough. James disappeared, replaced by a small cloud of smoke that caused us both to get teary-eyed. God, I hate that teleportation skill of his so much. The fact that he could teleport was fine, but the fact that it always came with a puff of smoke was so incredibly irritating. Not just because it looked silly, but because it actually carried the characteristics of normal smoke. There was, however, another person at the table that didn't quite share the same sentiments. He is so cool. Sophie, let's spar a bit. We can't let him leave us behind. Getting dragged out of the cafeteria by an overly excited Arthur, I wondered just how that cave dweller always managed to drive me mad every time I saw his face. James's puff, well, that worked well. I had just called back a clone that I had used to walk around the academy grounds and finally entered the cafeteria with. However, it hadn't been a clone made from my double trouble. Yesterday had brought a lot of ripe fruits, not just in the form of mana channels and knowledge about the potential of mana, but I had gained something else as well. Status name, James Jackson. Rank, E strength, F plus agility, E stamina, E intelligence, E plus mana capacity, D greater than main manual. Trickster, ungraded, medium understanding and ungraded manual for those who don't want to be understood. A trickster is only a trickster until people understand your tricks. Core skill, double trouble. First skill, swap. Second skill, materialize greater than side manual. Empty equals yes. My understanding of my manual had increased and I had unlocked my second skill. When I noticed this last night, I was both elated and incredibly confused. In the game, you would unlock the next part of the manual's skills when you reached level 25, but instead of just one skill, the player would gain 3. The player got one skill that had a long cooldown where you summoned another clone to fight, one skill where you could summon a raven, and one skill that transformed the player into a wolf for faster traveling. Strangely enough, these skills were all condensed into materialize for me in this world, but after studying the description for a bit and some experimentation, I realized why that was the case. Materialized description, two-part ability that lets the user harness the power of imagination. Part 1. The user can create another physical entity which can be set to either auto-combat mode or controlled mode. The user has to have a complete understanding of the entity he wants to create. The created entity cannot utilize skills or mana. Part 2. The user can transform his body into another physical entity. The user has to have a complete understanding of the entity he wants to transform into. It was a godly skill that let me create or transform into any kind of person or animal I wanted to, with the requirement that I completely understood it. The sad part about it was that the only thing I understood at this point in time was myself. Therefore I could only create another clone. The clone that was created with this skill, however, was not like the one I could call on with double trouble. In some ways, it acted the same, with me being able to control it at the same time, now splitting my consciousness into 3 parts, but the perception of that clone didn't feel as real. It was a much more disconnected feeling, meaning that even when I sent it into the dungeon, it didn't make my social anxiety go wild. It took a couple of hours to get used to having yet another clone I could control, but, after an all-that-nighter, I had managed to do so. It was also handy that I could just let it be automated in combat, meaning I wouldn't have to spend any mental energy controlling it. The biggest drawback to this skill was that it continuously drained my mana every second, meaning I couldn't keep it active at all times like I could with double trouble. Then there was the transformation part, which was the main reason both my main body and, what I now decided to call, sub-body were doing their best to learn everything I could about 2 different animals, 2 animals that I felt would be incredibly useful for me to be able to transform into. Sadly, I had to leave with sub-me as the first lesson of the day was about to start. Be careful out there. Yes, I will. It was a very moving scene, hugging myself to give me the strength needed to get through the day. If I could, I would have sent Matt, materialize me, but as it couldn't cultivate, nor would its physical progress carry over to me when I dismissed it, I had no choice but to go myself, or at least, go as sub-me. Chapter 19, Let's go to class. Hey, James. You chose this class too? As I entered the gym, which was the location for the physical training course, I was met by the shining golden boy and the pink-haired Amazon. Turns out that we had all 3 picked it. Yeah, I guess I did. As they were approaching me, they were carrying 2 very different expressions. Arthur wore a shining smile while Sophie looked like she had just eaten shit. She also deliberately walked a bit faster than Arthur so she could whisper some things into my ear. You and me, talk after school. Oh. A confession, I don't know if my maiden heart is ready though. What are you guys talking about? Before she could strangle me, Arthur saved me. It was pretty funny to see the large woman get all soft as soon as the hero opened his mouth, jumping right back to him like a bitch in heat. Oh, nothing. Just something stupid. Anyway, as I was saying before James showed up, you seem pretty comfortable in the gym. You must have trained a lot. Simp. The set of students who attended this class was very different from my previous courses, which made sense as it held in a lot of ways a very contrasting nature. Firstly we had me, Sophie and Arthur. A bit further and standing by some free weights we had Brad and Bradley talking and laughing loudly. Then we had Adriana and Adam who seemed to share a very casual conversation just to pass the time, and lastly, we had Sebastian who was already running on a treadmill. Luckily, it appeared that we didn't have any extremely traditional nobles in the group who hated commoners. The more I thought about it, the fact that I belonged to a clique where we were all commoners was pretty bad, almost as if we were asking to get noticed and bullied. I wasn't all that scared about getting physically assaulted or anything like that. What I felt most worried about was how they could make the future difficult. Did they have enough influence to make sure that I couldn't become a hunter in the future? Maybe they could even make it completely impossible for me to even join the weakest of guilds. These weren't things I would like to happen before I could make myself strong enough for society to look at me as an attractive resource that they wanted to acquire. There was another person in the room though. An incredibly old man, almost looking like a bald skeleton, wearing a pair of grey sweatpants and a black tank top. He was currently just watching his smartwatch as if he was waiting for a text from his lover. I had a pretty good feeling that I knew who that person was, and it didn't take long for my suspicion to be confirmed. A scraggly and weak voice rang out in the gym as he raised his head. Please gather around, students. Even though his voice was weak, it could be clearly heard in the entirety of the gym. Therefore it didn't take many seconds before we were all standing in front of the senior citizen. Now, I will be your physical training instructor, Mr. Garcia. With that being said, you are mostly free to train however you want in this gym. As you can see, it has all of the modern machines you might need, free weights going all the way up to 500 kilograms plates, and a gravity room where you can do calisthenics. Feel free to ask me for advice if needed. And with that, we were off to the races. Arthur, Do you mind showing me how you usually exercise? I am not really that comfortable with the gym. Sophie didn't hesitate at all to try her luck at getting closer to the hero, wanting him to show her the different machines and how to practice different exercises. The other students were also quick at finding their rhythms, with Adriana and Adam warming up on the treadmills, Brad and Bradley starting with doing some incredibly heavy deadlifts, and Sebastian going into the gravity room. It's truly impressive though. The gym was incredible. Clean white all over, machines for every single exercise one could think of, as well as exercises one didn't think of, and several power stations for doing larger lifts with free weights. Unfortunately, I had no idea what I was doing. If I wasn't so scared about making myself look bad, I would have also asked Arthur for advice, but, because of the way he saw me, I couldn't bring myself to do so. I guess I'll start by doing some warm-up exercises in the gravity room. There were 3 gravity rooms, with 2 vacant as Sebastian occupied one of them. The room itself held the same aesthetics as the rest of the gym, with pure white walls and ceiling, as well as a grey floor. Just next to the entrance there was a panel where you could input your desired gravity, going from 2x all the way to 20x. Feeling a bit cocky after my training sessions at home, I decided to start with a 4x gravity. It was a horrible sensation, feeling as if the air all around me wanted to push me down to the ground, but I grit my teeth and pushed through. Wanting to get used to the pressure before I started going through the motions, I began to just walk in a circle, which was in itself hard. Even though my body was already superhuman, having my body weigh 4 times as much still felt like hell. I couldn't help but get jealous of myself, who was sitting at home, still reading a book about animals while sipping on some black tea. Don't slack, sub me. Shut up. I'm trying my best. Sophie's pof, you can start with just the bar. It only weighs 50 kilograms, so it should be fine. Arthur was currently showing me how to bench press, an exercise I knew from Earth but had never done in my life. Even when I was healthy and went to the gym regularly, I was almost always training my legs or using the treadmills to run. Bench pressing wouldn't let me attain the booty that I wanted after all. Taking the bar off the rack, it felt so incredibly light that it barely felt like exercise. He did say it was light. Guess I'll try to focus on learning the motions. I slowly let it down to my chest, which unfortunately restricted the range of motion quite a bit because of the size, and then pushed it up again. While I was repeating this motion, Arthur kept on giving me pointers to correct my form. Don't let your elbows flare out. Keep your core tightened. After doing a lot of reps, I felt ready to try it for real, with Arthur agreeing as well. That seemed pretty easy for you. Let's bump it up to 100 kilograms. It might be a bit heavy, but I will be right here to spot you. The bench press had a panel where you could input the weight by just pressing a couple of buttons, so it didn't take long for the plates to magically appear on the bar. As I mentally prepared myself, I lifted the bar again. However, it was quite anticlimactic. It's still light. It didn't feel all that different from last time with me doing the repetitions with ease. After I was done, we repeated the process and increased the weights. I was in complete awe at the power that my current body could exude as my working weights. The weight that felt challenging but still possible, landed on 300 kilograms. A weight I could still do 10 repetitions of by gritting my teeth during the last 2. When I sat up, delighted by the refreshing feeling of accomplishment, I saw that Arthur had for some reason gone back into his AOR mode. Unable to watch the pitiful boy without my heart breaking, I had to ask, "What's wrong?" Clearly forcing a smile, he answered my question with an answer that put the final nail in the coffin to my plans of being a maiden. "Oh, nothing. It's just that my 1 repetition max is 250 kilograms. Oh." It took a couple of seconds for me to realize just what that meant. If I could do multiple repetitions with a weight that was 50 kilograms more than when he lifted his maximum capacity. Am I a freak? Looking around, I finally noticed that all the other students were gazing at me with curious eyes, probably having seen the feat I just pulled off. For the first time, I felt like I could relate to James. I want to hide somewhere, but I guess my body is too big for that. Beautiful lady. I assume that you are part of the A class. Would you care to give me your name? A bulky bald student with a scar over his left eye had come up to us and initiated a conversation with me, obviously interested in me for some reason. Sure. I'm Sophie reddened. Yes, I'm part of the A class. An even wider smile appeared on his face as I reciprocated his words, something I did purely out of politeness. That's a beautiful name for a beautiful lady. Tell me, is it possible for me to get your number? I would love to get the chance to talk with you some more. Knowing what had to be done in order to prevent the situation from escalating further, I politely but firmly rejected his approach. Sorry. I can absolutely give you my number, but just know that I am not interested in anything romantic. I already have someone I like. His face crumbled as his dreams of finding a wife shattered. Oh, ha ha ha. Yes, that's fine. When the man was walking away with a slouching back, an incredibly cute Arthur had to speak his mind as he tried his best not to look me in my eyes. Sophie, do you really have someone you like already? Too embarrassed to tell him the whole truth, I just put forth a curt answer. Yes, I do. I like you. Comment 5. Vote 2 left. Send gift. Chapter 20. Leave me alone. I was a bit late for lunch, as even though our uniforms had a self-cleaning ability, which could easily be used by injecting a bit of mana, we still had to shower after, and it was awful. Dragging my aching body that I had abused in the gravity room into the locker room and having to raise my arms to take off my clothes. And now, I had to go through yet another challenge, making me feel as if I was Odysseus in the Greek epic. I was going to have lunch in the cafeteria. Although my main body was eating at home already, it would take too long to recall the clone and then resummon it just for me to feel full. It was also good practice for me to get used to other people, something I desperately needed. It would just have been nice if it had been in moderation. It didn't take long for me to see that Sophie, Arthur, Anna, and Sarah were already sitting together, enjoying their meals. I wonder why Arthur is looking so down. Not like it's my business. This was my chance. I quickly sneaked my way to an empty table, making sure that the idiots didn't see me and pester me to sit with them. After all, it would only be unpolite if they saw my actions. Feeling amazing, getting to practice being out in the open without people talking to me, I started to enjoy the delicious chicken and noodles that I had gotten served. Bam. Hey, dork. Of course, things wouldn't go so smoothly. Turning my head to the side, I saw who the intruders of my privacy were. Mike and John were standing at the edge of the table, with Mike having been the one to slam his hand down at it to get my attention. It happened too fast. I wasn't ready for this. There were some slight suspicions to be had that being in the spotlight yesterday would lead to these elitist snobs trying to snuff me out, but I had thought they would at least wait until next week. These were two characters that I actually clearly remembered from the game, as they were a big part of the early development of the hero, and at that time I hadn't started to skip all the conversations. Mike, the heir to the mighty Denver House of Flame-wielding magicians, and John, who was pretty much just his lackey. They were mobs in the game, but in real life, I assumed that they would be pretty strong as it was the beginning of the semester. Hey, didn't you hear me? Mike appeared to be thinking that I was ignoring him while, in reality, I was just lost in thought, something that pissed him off immensely. As stated before, it wasn't a good time for me to get a target painted on my back. Glib tongue, activate. Oh sorry. I was just surprised that the heir of the Denver family would take his time to talk to me. I've heard a lot about you. How you awakened your elemental affinity at a very young age, and that you are pretty much a prodigy when it comes to fast casting fire spells. Both of the guys were shocked at how I was wagging my non-existent tail like a puppy, even going as far as to stand up and interrupt my meal to pay respect. Oh, yay, that's me. Good that you know your place, commoner. Having no more words to say, they left me alone to finally finish my meal. However, it didn't take long for yet another visitor to come by, even going as far as sitting down in front of me. Why did you act like that? A beautiful girl with silver hair with a delicate but still incredibly attractive body. Adriana had seen what had just gone by and came to talk to me as well, her voice reeking with arrogance. But for fuck's sake, I just got rid of those guys. Good luck, sub me. Shut up. Once again I had to bring out my secret technique, although this time I couldn't help but show a tinge of sarcasm. What brings a lovely princess like you to a lowly commoner like me? She didn't appreciate my politeness, her well-put face turning into a frown as she crossed her arms. Don't do that. I don't know from which house you truly came from, but you can't deceive me by trying to act like a commoner. There is no way someone with your talents wouldn't be from a powerful human family. My brows raised as I heard her spouting some A-class stupidity. So here it is, the classic misunderstanding. Even though it was pretty funny, it wasn't something that I couldn't use to my advantage. Be smart about this. What do you mean, Your Highness? I think it should be pretty obvious that I am just an ordinary orphan. She gritted her teeth, annoyed that I was, in her mind, playing with her by spouting bullshit. We both know that there is no way that an orphan would get their hands on a manual that had a teleportation skill. Then there is also the fact that you either have an insane talent at mana manipulation or you have already gotten trained enough that you already know how to use it, meaning you are pretending you are a novice. Now cut the bullshit. I was promised that there would be no heirs from any of the hidden families before I accepted to become a symbolic student here for diplomacy. Is everyone here just inclined to speak the first thing that ever comes to mind? Or maybe this isn't something that needs to be kept a secret? Putting my hands up in the air, I carried on with my act, though I was mainly speaking the truth. I'm sorry, Princess. I don't know what you are talking about. And about the manual, it is just an ordinary ungraded manual that I happened to come across by accident. From my research, it appeared that ungraded manuals weren't regarded all too highly in this world, mostly because not a lot of people seem to be able to bring out their true potential. Not able to take it anymore, she rapidly stood up and left me at the table with some last menacing words. You are a snake, James. But don't worry, I will find out the truth, and when I do, you will regret lying to me. Watching the elven princess walk away, appreciating the form that her lovely bottom took on in the student uniform, a grin emerged on my face. I did feel some slight angst because of the fact that I just pissed off a princess, but I was pretty sure that she wouldn't stoop so low as to hire someone to attack me. The princess herself wasn't weak by any means, and in the elven society, she was regarded as a prodigy that would only appear in a million elves. Sadly, humans developed their powers a lot faster than elves, as compensation for their much shorter lifespans. Where an elf could live for hundreds of years, the lifespan of an ordinary human in this world was just about 100 years, increasing depending on the rank that one managed to obtain. This was also the argument I came up with to try and justify why she got placed in the B class in this academy, where most of the students were human elites. She was just a bit above average. I did think I remembered that she got pretty strong in the game though, so it would be fun to see her progress. Sophie's poff. What are those idiots doing now? Mike had managed to gather the attention of all the students in the cafeteria when he slammed his hand down in front of James, actively trying to show off. In return, I was now watching the goblin verbally prostrating, trying his best not to offend the red-haired youth. Sophie, should we go over there? A worried Arthur asked me. Knowing now that he had actively avoided sitting with us, I felt like I very much wanted to see nature take its course. He is going to be fine. Relax. Oh, okay. And fine he was. It didn't take long for the Christmas heads to leave him alone as he continued his meal. However, just a minute later another person approached his table. Adriana had walked right up to him and took a seat in front of him. Unfortunately, I couldn't hear what they were talking about, but judging by their facial expressions there was one thing I was sure of. He is being a moron again. It wasn't hard to see that Adriana did not like what James had to say as her face warped more and more throughout their conversation. In the end, she just stood and left, with her last line being a lot more audible. You will regret lying to me. Did he just piss off the princess of the elves during our third day of class? And what did he lie about? Maybe. As my mind spun, making a lot of incorrect assumptions that were mostly based on romance novels, Sarah spoke. Do you guys think Adriana and James have something going on? She wore a face of indisputable worry, worried that maybe the one she was interested in might be dating another princess. I liked Sarah a lot already. She was nice, polite, and gentle while still carrying herself with dignity and pride. Right now, however, She just looked like an ordinary teenage girl, having normal teenage problems. Unfortunately for her, Arthur swooped in and made the situation even worse. "Don't worry, Sarah. We already know that he doesn't have time for love. He is too invested in his training." Sarah's small flicker of hope was snuffed out as Arthur indirectly told her that there was no way he would be interested in her. Comment 7. Vote 2 left. Send gift. Chapter 21. Let's go to class. 5. It was finally time to see what the last course I had picked had in store for me. A lot of students from both the A class and the B class had gathered in a big gymnasium. Everyone except for Mike, John, Adriana, Arthur and Anna was there. Thankfully the gymnasium was pretty big, meaning that even though we were 14 students here, it didn't feel crowded. In front of us stood Miss Turner, dressed up with the same kind of black skirt and white shirt combo as she seemed to like. All of the young men were practically drooling when their eyes got to see the mature knockout, her hourglass body and incredible face creating the illusion of a succubus. Listen up, this will be the first lesson of the elemental alignment course where you will try to find out what element you have an affinity for. As soon as you awaken your element, this class will be replaced by one of the specific elemental manipulation courses. Something was bugging me a lot about her explanation. What was the difference between mana manipulation and elemental manipulation? I had no idea, but hopefully, it wouldn't take long until I got an answer. Clap. Putting her hands together, she somehow summoned a row of different colored orbs, all sitting on their own pedestal behind her, the orbs being blue, red, brown, green, and black, symbolizing the 5 basic elements as well as the darkness element. If I had paid closer attention to the game, I might have known why the light element wasn't represented, but it wasn't something I really cared all too much about. Not that it was anything I could take for granted, as this wasn't the game anyway. You will all now take turns to see what orb reacts to your touch. Remember that even though an orb might react, there is still a chance that you have a derivative element, meaning it might not be one of the basic 4. What she was talking about was the fact that elements like ice, metal, lightning, etc. were derivative elements that originated from the basic elements. Ice from water, metal from earth, and so forth. And even if you do have an affinity for a basic element, you still need to find the alignment inside of you before you awaken it. Also, do remember that elements aren't necessary for you to grow strong. There is no need to force yourselves to learn how to manipulate an element just for the sake of it. Now, let's begin. Sarah Lint. She stepped up to the plate and touched the orbs, one at a time until she ended up on the wind orb, which started glowing as she put her hand on it. You have the wind element or a derivative of it. Bellatrix Rue. And like that, all of the students took a turn each to go through the process. The results from the A class, who for some reason were the first ones to step up, weren't anything surprising really. Bellatrix got a reaction from the earth orb, same as her brother, Adam, while the crazy guy, whom I didn't know the name of, got a reaction from the dark orb. It was pretty awkward to hear him go "Kukaku." This is where my legend begins. Like a complete edgelord. The last to go out of the A class was Sophie, and I was incredibly interested in seeing where she would get a reaction. I did think it was strange that the god didn't let us choose our elements when we made our character, but that also made it more exciting to see what we would get. Just like our teacher had stated earlier, there was no actual need to master an element in order to grow stronger, so no matter what element I got, it didn't matter much. Though it had to be said that my main body had stopped reading about my chosen animals to fantasize about sending out fireballs or wind blades toward my enemies, calling out a huge tsunami to drown an entire town. Sophie read. Oh, it's time. The one I got to meet first in this world walked steadily toward the orbs, though I imagined that she was incredibly nervous. She walked to the water orb and put her hand on it. After a couple of seconds of no reactions, she pulled back her hand and, for some unknown reason, looked incredibly disappointed. There was no way for me to know that she was praying to God for her element to be either water or ice, as it would complement the color of her draconic transformation. Putting her hand on the fire orb, there was instantly an intense reaction. When the other students had gotten their orbs to react, they had just glowed in their respective colors, but when Sophie's orb reacted, a wave of heat spread out like a ripple. Wonderful, Sophie. You have an incredible connection to your elemental affinity. Walking back from the pedestals, she was wearing a flustered smile with accompanying flushed cheeks because of the sudden praise. After she had made her way back to the crowd, it was time for the students of the B class to see what elements they had aligned. Suzanne had a reaction to the fire orb as well. Brad and Bradley got a reaction from the water and the earth orb respectively, making Brad feel a bit bad that he didn't get the earth element as well. In his mind, the water element wasn't as manly as the earth element. Then we had Trisha, who made the wind orb spread its green glow. Sebastian Krop, PFFT. I could barely contain my laughter when I heard his name. The name Sebastian was for me a pretty cool name, incredibly suited to the aloof and few-worded youth that carried himself with pride. But the surname completely killed any sense of coolness that I had unconsciously attached to the man. He just walked straight to the brown earth orb as if he was already sure what element he would awaken, something that was most likely the case judging by the reaction the orb had to his touch. Instead of glowing ink brown, it changed color to a sleek gray, very reminiscent of metal. Oh, that's interesting. It seems like your affinity for the metal element that even the orb instantly switched its character. Nicely done, Mr. Krop. Sebastian was one of the people that I was sure wasn't part of the game that we played on Earth. His purple hair and hilarious last name were just too hard for me to have forgotten. James Jackson. Not letting me ponder any more about the mystery that was Sebastian, my teacher called my name. Two different feelings struggled for supremacy inside of me. The first feeling was the excitement of finding out if I was going to be able to learn to rain thunder down on my enemies, while the other one was the urge to run away so I didn't have to stand in the spotlight in front of all the other students. I can do this. Yes, we can do this. Now both of my bodies had their full attention on what was happening as I slowly made my way to the pedestals. Taking a deep breath, I put my hands on the water orb. Although I felt a slight tugging sensation, there was no reaction from it. Not wanting to stand here for longer than necessary, I repeated the process with the fire orb, which ended with the same results. I felt a bit of a lump in my throat as I approached the earth element. The earth element was probably the one element I didn't want to align with, and this was for one very good reason. It was super lame. Who wanted to be able to just throw stones? My eyes closed shut as I put my hand on the brown orb, praying to Thea, whom I had gotten to know was the main goddess of this world, that I wouldn't align with it. Mr. Jackson, are you alright? Miss Turner's words made me open my eyes, forcing me to face reality once more. Thank you, Thea. There had been no reaction from the orb in front of me, filling me with delight and relief. I wasn't forced to give up on learning elemental manipulation, which was the only solution I had come up with if I ended up with the earth element. Turning my head and scratching it, I awkwardly answered my teacher, "Oh, yay, I'm fine. Just a bit of a headache." She didn't carry the same prideful and imposing aura anymore as she looked at me with strange eyes, almost looking a bit sad. "Are you sure? You know that you can tell me anything. I'm your teacher after all." Suddenly my back started hurting a lot and, rotating my head, I saw the reason all of the male students had eyes filled with envy and hate because of the words that the gorgeous lady had said with a completely different demeanor than what she showed the other students. While scurrying along to the wind orb, and casually putting my hand on it, I repeated myself again, "Yes, I'm fine." In a matter of less than a second, the wind orb had reacted to my touch and sent out a huge wave of mist, making me unable to see Miss Turner, who wasn't even 2 meters away from me. After a moment of surprise, I couldn't stop the reaction that followed. Luckily my face was disguised by the mist so that no one could see the huge, sinister smile that had emerged. Chapter 22, Let's Go to Class. Final letting go of the orb in front of me, the mist quickly dissipated as if it had never existed in the first place. No one uttered a single word after the bizarre phenomenon they had just witnessed, making it pretty clear that this wasn't something that happened often. "I need to get out." The intense stares from everyone around me got to the point of being unbearable, my anxiety finally overflowing. Poff. So I withdrew my clone, not caring about the consequences of skipping the rest of the lesson. Jessica's Poff James had frozen completely when he put his hand on the Earth alignment guide, forcing his eyes shut as if he was praying to some higher being that he had to get a reaction from it or something horrible would happen. When I saw that even though more than a minute passed, and the guide wasn't reacting at all, my heart broke. However, there was nothing that could be done right here and now. Therefore I tried to get his attention. "Mr. Jackson, are you all right?" He turned his head to me and clearly forced himself to smile, because his eyes sure weren't. "Oh yeah, I'm fine, just a bit of a headache." La. There were so many things I wanted to say, but I had to mind where and what was happening right now. All the other students had their eyes on us, watching us intently. Trying my best to put on a brave face, I did try to plant a small seed in his mind. "Are you sure? You know that you can tell me anything. I'm your teacher after all." A lot of people knew me as a heartless woman, a woman who mercilessly slaughtered my enemies with my Shin manual, sometimes even going as far as literally ripping them apart using telekinesis. But if there was one thing I couldn't bear to see, it was the torment of younglings and animals. Both of these groups didn't make choices to induce their own suffering. It was almost always the product of parents or owners who forced their wills upon the ones they were supposed to care about. Even official noble houses could be pretty tough on their offspring if they didn't awaken the traditional element of their house, like if Mike didn't awaken the fire element. But the hidden houses were most likely 10 times worse. James just kept forcing that smile of his as he quickly walked to the wind guide, most likely not seeing any point in continuing this as he had already failed. "Yes, I'm fine." Something amazing happened when he put his hand on the wind guide, something I had never seen in my life. Although it was rare, it was known that some individuals have strong enough affinities with an element to make the guides have peculiar reactions, like in the case of Sophie and Sebastian, but this reaction was on a completely different level. A wave of incredibly dense mist enshrouded us all, making it impossible to see more than a meter ahead. What was even more amazing was that it also completely shrouded the mana signature of the young man who had unconsciously called upon it. It was as if he completely disappeared. At first, I even thought that he might have died, but just a second after the mist vanished, letting everyone see the shaken James standing in front of us. I was speechless. No, we were all speechless. Poff. And then he was just replaced with a cloud of smoke, having teleported away just like he had done from our first homeroom. Stress and fear started to slowly replace my astonishment when thinking about how the young man was probably scared that he might lose his life now, even though his affinity had been impossibly strong with another element. Quickly making a decision, I ended the lesson early, and as I was just about to run to James's apartment to make sure he didn't do anything stupid, one student stayed behind when the others had left. Adriana blocked my path. "I don't think you have to be worried about Mr. Jackson, Miss Turner." Scanning the proud elf, I felt a slight irritation start to grow in my belly. Does she know something that I don't? She is royalty, so it is possible. Crossing my arms, inadvertently pushing my voluminous chest up, I made sure to talk with the authority of a teacher at Inu. "Miss Alden, I hope that you understand that we do not regard you as a princess at the academy, just like we don't regard Sarah as royalty either. Now, please do tell me why I shouldn't worry about the student who might have hurt himself during the guiding. Also, what is your excuse for skipping class and coming here?" The weirdest part was that she wasn't even part of the students who had picked this course. I knew that she had already awakened her ice element before she even came to the academy. As expected of royalty, she didn't even flinch at my sharp words, probably more than used to being put on the spot in political contexts. Instead, she met me head-on, keeping herself polite but still spouting heavy words. "Miss Turner, first of all, I got permission from my teacher to come here to see what elemental affinities my classmates had. Secondly, we both know that James wouldn't get hurt by something like this." Adriana completely resolved all the questions I had expertly, talking with clarity and precision. She also discreetly made it clear that she also thought that the short youth was an heir of a hidden family because, if he was, he would have been forced through enough training that he would be fine. My eyes narrowed as she had set the stage we were going to play on. "Miss Alden, what do you want?" An innocent smile emerged on her face, sending shivers down my spine. I just want to share information with you. Even if you suspect that he is going to be in trouble, it would be foolish to stick your head out without thinking. Even if Ainu is powerful, we both know what kind of monsters exists out there. It would be a shame to act trashly just to doom the entire academy. Her words instantly cooled me down as she reminded me just what the hidden families were. Even if a lot of teachers at Ainu were extremely capable, they were just pebbles in the road if one were to consider a war against the underground houses. The proposal also intrigued me quite a bit, and even if I didn't have a lot of information to trade at the moment, I was still holding a teacher's position. This meant that I was in a better position to gather information about him than Adriana, and she was well aware of this. Noticing that my eyes had changed, she stretched out her dainty hand towards me. "Do we have a deal?" Taking her hand, I just nodded as a sign of approval. When she was walking away, there had been another thing bothering me. Why did her hand feel so incredibly rough? James's paw. After spending a couple of hours making the best use of my time, sulking in my bed, I had taken my position at the laptop, searching for information about elemental awakenings while Submi was practicing with our scythe. It didn't seem all too complicated to awaken one's element. The main reason why one used the orbs, that I now know as guides, was to make it easier to search for the affinity in the inner self. I guess I have to meditate and dive into myself to find it? Please don't dive into me. Shut up, you know what we mean. As it was pretty obvious what element I had an affinity for, the mist element, which was a derivative of wind, I sat down on the floor, cross-legged, and closed my eyes. From the instructions on the internet, I was supposed to just try my best and first let go of my self-awareness, something which was pretty hard to do as I had two consciousnesses active at the moment. Thankfully, I had practiced enough with my clone that I was incredibly proficient at controlling my own mind, something which was necessary if one wanted to use the Trickster manual. Thus it didn't feel like it took all that long before I sank into myself, a space of pure black, the outer layer of my own soul. Now, the next step was to visualize the element and coax it into accepting me as its master. Shouldn't be all too hard, right? With the vision of the mist that emerged from the guiding orb still fresh in my mind, I imagined myself being the center of it, hidden from the outer world, safe in my solitude. In no time my dear friend started to approach me, starting as the light mist one might see on a warm morning after a rainy night. "You want to know me too, right? We are perfect for each other after all." My thoughts triggered something in the mist, as it started to grow denser and dance around my body, happy to have found someone who knew the joy of isolation. In the end, all of the mist gathered into one big, grayish sphere and entered my imaginary body. Back on the bed, it felt as if I had just eaten a 3-course dinner, feeling so very full of matter. Smiling, I knew that I had somehow managed to awaken my element on my first try. Kyukaku. This is where my legend begins. Quickly recalling my clone, not even minding the fact that our scythe fell right down to the floor in the practice room, I wanted to make sure that Submi had the same awakening as I did as soon as possible. Maybe. Status name, James Jackson. Rank, E Strength, F+ Agility, E Stamina, E Intelligence, E+ Mana Capacity, D- greater than main manual. Trickster, ungraded, medium understanding and ungraded manual for those who don't want to be understood. A trickster is only a trickster until people understand your tricks. Core skill, Double Trouble, first skill, Swap, second skill, Materialize greater than side manual, Empty greater than elemental affinity, Mist greater than elemental skills, empty. And there it was, neatly fitted into my status panel. My lovely little mist. Comment 6. Comment. Vote 2 left. Send gift. Chapter 23, Side Manual. What should I do today? I don't know. Maybe we should train some more. Weren't I pretty close to gaining an understanding of the first animal I chose as well for Materialize? I were currently sitting at my kitchen table, both sipping on some hot instant coffee to get us started for the day, discussing what I should do. That's true. It would be a boon to get it ready before classes start again next week. Having already spent the entirety of yesterday, which was Friday, skipping class, I knew that I had to go back on Monday if I didn't want to risk getting kicked out. Now, in reality, I hadn't been planning on skipping yesterday either, but somehow I had gotten a text from Miss Turner on Thursday that stated, "I understand that you might not feel so good right now. I have talked to Mrs. Bright and Mr. Black and informed them that you might not show up tomorrow. Please do remember that you can always talk to a teacher if you need help." It was a very sweet, but very weird, message from the Iron Lady. At this point, it was obvious that she had a soft spot for me, something I dismissed as a light attraction to my handsome face. I still don't understand why she thought I would want to skip my lessons yesterday. Maybe it was because of the harsh reaction from the wind guide. I don't think I read anything about someone getting hurt though. Dismissing my unnecessary thoughts, I settled my plans for the day and got going. Unfortunately, a part of my plans involved having to leave the safety of my home and venture into the unknown. Do we really have to do this? I know it's important to get my hands on the side manual that we decided would be better than Spellblade, but can't we just wait a bit? You know as well as I do. PFFT. Yes, we are the same person, haha, very funny. Anyway, I'll get going then. Hopefully, it's still in the same location as it was in the game. It was a long shot, but I couldn't justify not trying my luck at gaining a manual for free, even if it meant going out as sub-me and walking around the academy grounds for an unspecified duration. As I walked out of my apartment, now dressed in the black training wear once more, I continued to read about the animal I wanted to be able to transform into on some animal site on the internet. Sophie's Poff having somehow managed to convince Arthur that rest was an essential part of growing stronger. We were currently strolling around the academy just looking around at all the different facilities and buildings that were strewn across all around us. Don't get me wrong, I was also very determined to grow stronger during my stay at Ainu, not just because I wanted to help Arthur, but because it felt pretty damn good being strong. Having finished another 2 sessions with Mr. Brown yesterday, I had started to feel like fighting was pretty fun as well. Just me against my enemy, fighting to see who was the strongest. Catching myself having some very weird thoughts, my face flushed a bit, embarrassed by how childish I was. Maybe I'm also an idiot like James? And while I was thinking of the devil, look, Sophie. Isn't that James? What is he doing? He ran ahead of me, letting me get a good look at his juicy bottom, which was tightly tucked into a pair of blue jeans. Unfortunately, he hadn't switched the clothes on his upper body. At least he was only wearing the black academy shirt with golden adornments without the jacket. Me? I was just wearing the complete student uniform as I hadn't had the chance to go shopping yet. When I was first trying out the functions of my smartwatch, I had gotten a very exciting surprise. My bank account had a balance of $100.000. This meant that I at least didn't have to worry about money as long as I spent it wisely, and as the students also got a monthly allowance of $50.000 if they were a part of the 8 class, I wasn't worried at all. Following my beloved, we found James wearing the black training wear he always wore next to a tree, only this time they were completely covered in dirt. Turning my eyes toward the ground, there was a pretty big hole next to the tree. "James, what are you doing here?" Noticing my intense gaze, he quickly made some bullshit lie up to explain himself. "Oh, hi guys. I was just retrieving something I forgot here yesterday. Just some old clothes." I was already well aware that even if he was an idiot, he spouted bullshit not because he was stupid but because he probably did find it a bit amusing. I wonder if he knows that himself. The James that I had met in heaven was just so different from the character he was acting as at the academy, that there was no doubt that at least a part of his behavior was calculated, though I had no doubts that he was still a cave goblin that hated the rise of the sun. But what made me the most depressed was that his stupid mannerism always illuminated just how innocent and inexperienced my hero currently was. "Oh, really? That's pretty weird, man. Ha ha ha." If not for his smile making my legs weak, I would have interjected in the situation. But alas, a maiden in love should be excused for not wanting to ruin her darling's beautiful smile, right? I wonder how many children he wants. So anyway, I have to get going again. See you guys around, Poff. James's Poff. The fact that I could send out my clone and input things into my smartwatch inventory with sub-me and then get it retrieved to my main body when I withdrew the clone was just so astonishingly handy. I had found what I had been looking for pretty easily, as it was a manual that I had used during several of my playthroughs of the game, having already decided that using the Spellblade manual would be superfluous, as I could learn how to manually use mana in order to enact spells and skills. My second choice was clear as a bell to me. Taking out the old tome from my inventory, I felt my heart speeding up a bit in excitement. Manual, Conjurer, ungraded description. The art of conjuration is endless, only bound by the imagination of its user. This art doesn't carry with it specific skills. Instead, it has an ever-evolving core skill that gains authority depending on the understanding of the user. Depending on the nature of mana that the user applies, different phenomena can be called upon. In simpler words, this was a very general mage art that was flexible depending on one's elemental affinity, just like it was dependent on whatever elemental game the player had equipped in the game. This is pretty weird, isn't it? What was strange about the manual was the fact that it explicitly stated that it didn't carry with it specific skills, instead only containing a core skill. When I played the game, it had a different core skill depending on the gem equipped, but held 4 generic skills that held the same form no matter what element was applied. It was also an ungraded manual instead of the 6-star it had been in the virtual world. Is this truly right for me then? I have no idea what it takes to master the core skill to the extent that I can conjure the skills I want. There were apparent pros and cons to the manual I had dug up. The biggest con was the fact that I couldn't rely on my knowledge of the game. Also, from my research, I had gotten across the fact that manuals wasn't at all as simple in this world as I thought. The main manual one had was permanent. It couldn't be changed no matter how much one wanted to. Luckily, the side manual was interchangeable, but there appeared to be a general understanding that changing one's side manual would permanently damage one's potential. In other words, this was something I truly didn't want to happen. But the upsides seem amazing. Using 2 ungraded manuals could surely be regarded as the actions of a fool, even more so when both of the manuals were more focused on utility more than pure battle prowess. Still, there was something inside of me that pushed me into thinking that the potential would be endless. Even though I joked around with silly thoughts from time to time, about becoming a trickster of death and so forth, my main goal was never to become strong just for the sake of it. I just wanted to survive and live my life as I saw fit. With that in mind, this might be the best combination of manuals that I could have. Fuck it. I don't want to waste time training by wavering. Injecting my mana into the tome, I felt a surge of information entering my head. Visions of huge waves, firestorms, and black holes were shown to me as I automatically gained a minor understanding of what a conjurer could do. Status name, James Jackson. Rank, E strength, F+ agility, E stamina, E intelligence, E+ mana capacity, D- greater than main manual. Trickster, ungraded, medium understanding. Core skill, double trouble. First skill, swap - greater than side manual. Conjurer, ungraded, minor understanding. Core skill, conjure - greater than elemental affinity. Mist - greater than elemental skills. Empty. Comment 3. Comment. Vote 2 left. Send gift. Chapter 24. Crazy Earthling. It was a bit anticlimactic that I didn't have to journey to the depths of a volcano or the top of the highest mountain to find the manual, but it was very comfortable. Having already learned the manual, making the physical tome dematerialize and disappear, all that was left was to practice it. As its disappearance left me with a somewhat clear notion of what it made me able to do, I was eager to start experimenting. The manual was pretty much what I assumed elemental manipulation to be, but on steroids, as long as the user found intricate and efficient ways of using it. This was also one of the reasons I hesitated to learn it. I was pretty sure that the mist element didn't carry a lot of offensive capabilities, thus it was translated to my side manual being the same. However, now I was certain that it could be worth it as long as I made up for it by strengthening my body and practicing using the scythe. Getting up from my bed, I called out, "Sub me, my second body who carried the same childish glee that I did. "Let's begin." "Yes." Sub-me walked with confidence, excited about seeing what I would be able to do as it sat down in front of the computer to cram information about an animal. At the same time, I took my main body to the practice room and started to try and get a feel of the mist inside of me. Having read up a bit about elemental manipulation, I concluded that the biggest difference between it and mana manipulation was the fact that one needed to carry out a conversion process before using one's element. You could compare it to having to compress raw data before converting it to another digital format, as to finally uploading it to the internet. My skill conjure pretty much automated this process for me, leaving me with only having to call out my mist and forming it to my desire, as long as it was within the realm of my understanding. It was mostly a matter of efficiency, both in the speed of conjuring the phenomena but also in terms of waste of energy, both of which were improved if I used my skill. Putting my hand out, parallel to the floor, I began with caution, not wanting to accidentally empty all my mana instantly. A small grayish cloud of mist concealed my hand from the world, with even myself not able to see it. The mana expenditure was divided into two parts, one larger consumption as I conjured the mist, and when that was done, there was a continuous drain every second. Concealment, deliquescence, and intangibility were the main characteristics of the element. Concealment as it blocked the eyes of spectators, deliquescence as it appeared as suddenly as it disappeared, and intangibility as it had the shared nature of its sibling the wind. These three things were what I needed to keep in mind when trying to create my automated elemental skills that would get ingrained into my being, as well as the attributes I had to control when I used my mist more freely. Injecting more mana into the small cloud of mist, I enlarged it into a dome with a circumference of 2 meters, making it occupy the space in every direction around me. This time, I could feel a tangible loss of mana as it grew outwards and a somewhat severe cost per second to uphold it. My first goal in manipulating my mist was just this, creating an area of mist where my presence couldn't be seen or felt by anyone outside of it, buying me time to plan another move in case I was in danger or to launch a surprise attack at an enemy. Thinking about it, I haven't even sparred anyone yet. I wonder how real fight feels? I guess it's natural though. What kind of earthling would just instantly acclimate to the different culture and be comfortable with fighting? Sophie's path. In the end, we ended up on the sparring grounds again because Arthur got fired up as he thought about how hard James was working, or at least because of how hard he said he was training. I still wasn't sure if I trusted him about his talks about training. It was not like he had shown anything except for the teleportation skill. Having changed his pants into the black slacks that were part of the uniform, Arthur was now smiling brightly at me, ready for another session of getting his ass kicked. "I'm ready." Smiling back at him, I also made myself ready to fight. I had stopped bothering to dragonize my hands though, as it was overkill because of the difference in our stats. That was not to say that I didn't overwhelm him with skill. I was clearly the more skillful out of us. Something I could only attribute some kind of inner instinct I must have been granted by the god who reformed my body. "Come at me then." With my shout acting as a trigger, he dashed toward me, not afraid of me getting hurt even though he was using a real longsword. Using the momentum of his dash, he stabbed out with his sword toward my chest. Seeing his telegraphed movement, it was easy for me to turn my body and return the favor by aiming a right-handed punch at his face. Somehow, the feeling of flesh against my hand never came. Arthur had managed to crouch down, dodging my punch and setting himself in a pretty good position as he swung his sword upwards towards me. There was no time for me to dodge this, so I had no choice but to quickly dragonize my hands and catch the sword in my left hand. Feeling a bit annoyed that he had improved so much in just a couple of days that he forced me to use my skill when I previously overwhelmed him, I sent him away by punching his stomach with my right hand, resulting in Arthur getting flying a couple of meters before landing on the ground. During our week at the academy, I had already gotten over hurting him as it now felt like I was helping him by sparring with him. There was also the fact that no matter how hard I punched him, he always got up with a smile on his face. Just like he did this time as well. He. You transformed your hands. That must mean I got stronger. It was almost scary how much progress he had made after just a couple of days, especially when reminding myself of the fact that I was also making a lot of progress every day. There was obviously a very valid reason why he was the hero of the story. However, I wasn't angry at the fact that he was improving freakishly fast. On the contrary, I was more than happy. It didn't take long at all for him to start showing signs of what he would become in the future. You did, Arthur. I told you, you will be strong as long as you continue working hard. Let's go again. Raising my draconic paws in front of me like Mr. Brown had shown me, I prepared myself for another bout of sparring as I knew that Arthur wouldn't give up so easily. When he got up from the ground and raised his weapon in a classic swordsman position, I was the one to go on the offensive this time, also eager to try a new trick of mine. Draconic strength empowering my body through my skill. I also added some extra mana into my legs to further the enhancement before I launched myself forward. The result was that I pretty much jumped horizontally all the way to Arthur, who in turn didn't expect the sudden shift in momentum and got caught off guard. Taking advantage of the opening, I sent out a right uppercut toward his chest, but was once again surprised as he managed to squeeze his sword in front of him just in time to block it. Although he was still sent upwards and back, he landed on his feet, quickly steadying himself, and dashed forward. Mimicking his movement, his weapon and my right claws met in the center of us, creating a temporary stalemate. I did, however, carry an overwhelming advantage in this position as I still had my left hand free to try and grab him. Seeing that he was in danger, he used his right leg and kicked off from my thighs, and sent himself backward. Unfortunately for him, he didn't have time to fix his posture before kicking off, making him fall on his back in front of me. The next second I was towering over him and sent my right fist downwards toward his face. Bam! Of course, I didn't actually hit him with that attack. I was not a savage. Instead, I had sent my fist into the ground just a couple of centimeters away from his head to show that I had won the spar. Looking down, Arthur was half smiling and half pouting because I had once again defeated him. You really are too strong, Sophie. Inspecting his smiling face just about 10 centimeters away from my own, I felt my face flush as my heart started to flutter. In order to not get arrested for indecent acts on public ground, I quickly stood up, while at the same time giving him a hand and lifting him up, with my face still mimicking a cherry. Don't worry, Arthur. You said it yourself, right? You have already gotten a lot stronger. Scratching the back of his head, his face also gained a tint of red as he was embarrassed by my praise. Thank you, Sophie. Oh, look at the time. If we were going out to town we should start moving, I think, or we won't be able to find a restaurant to eat at. Yes, it was time. This was my first real date with Arthur. It was just sad that he didn't know that. Chapter 25, A Night Out. So, why am I here, exactly? Because Sophie said that you needed rest to grow stronger, and she is probably the strongest out of all of us. I don't know how I got talked into joining the group for a trip out to the city center, now sitting on the train that would take us there from the academy. Maybe it was because it felt unpolite to decline the excited golden boy, maybe it was because I was still overly hyped after getting my side manual. No matter what, I had somehow ended up here as a part of the clique. As the train had its seat paired up and facing each other, the whole group could sit with each other. The group in question, which consisted of me, Arthur, Sarah, Anna, and Sophie, with me and Arthur on one side and the girls in front of us. All of us were wearing student uniforms, something Arthur had encouraged me to do, as well as it seemed like students got a lot of discounts in several places. Luckily I had gotten a couple of sets sent to my room during my absence from class yesterday. It wasn't bad, per se, getting to lay my eyes upon the three very different beauties in front of me. Anna, the petite and delicate girl wearing elegant glasses. Unfortunately, her curves were just not there, making her very much not my type. Then we had Sarah, with her amazing golden hair, somewhat innocent face, and moderate but very attractive body. From a purely physical point of view, she was pretty great, but when one considered the fact that she was a princess, it was a no-go. Even more so as she had said that as soon as we got to the city, Her bodyguards would watch us in secret throughout our entire stay. Lastly, we had Sophie. All of her was very, very in line with my type of girl. Extremely curvy, yet athletic body and a mature face. It was just that it would be nice if she was several sizes smaller. Still, they were well worth taking some time to look at, similar to how one would appreciate Mona Lisa or the Eiffel Tower. It's also a good distraction from the fact that I'm going to get surrounded by hundreds of people in a couple of minutes. My heartbeat started speeding up, my neck sweating, and my face felt cold. Just as I was about to have a minor panic attack, Sarah managed to save me. So James, what have you been up to this week? I mean, I know that you have been training, but what kind of training did you do? As my vision was still a bit blurry, I didn't notice the slight blush on her face. Well, I have mostly been meditating, practicing with my weapon, doing some physical training, and reading up on animals. Oh, I also learned how to use my element. All of the other students just stared at me in awe, unable to understand how I was able to get so much done in a single week. Most students would spend their time focusing on one thing at a time, like how Sophie and Arthur spent most of their free time sparring. Thus they must have believed I was an idiot for doing so many things at once. Or so I thought. You already learned how to use your element? How? Sarah was the one to ask the question, but I could see that the others were thinking the same thing, all of them intently waiting for my answer while leaning forward. Seems like it was even more impressive than I thought. It would be a waste to tell them about my side manual, ruining the illusion that I am a super genius. Well, it took a couple of tries, but then it just sort of happened. Bullshit. Prove it. Anna didn't believe my lies at all, her little face turning into a frown as she called me out. If only she knew that I was lying about the fact that I only needed one try to conjure my mist. Straightening my back a bit, re-energized by the looks of awe coming from my fellow youths, I met her demand head-on. Sure, I'll prove it. Lifting my right hand, I quickly conjured a small cloud of dense mist around it, making Anna whisper, "Holy shit." After letting it conceal my hand for a couple of seconds, I spread it out thinner around us, reenacting the same kind of visual potency as when you were looking through fogged glass. Feeling pleased with my little performance, I let the mist dissipate, ending the obstruction of our visions. Keeping a poker face, to make sure I looked as humble and cool as possible, I just concluded the conversation with a "See, told you I learned how to use it." Anyway, how long is it until we reach the city? Turning my head out towards the window, I completely missed the fact that one of the girls was currently staring down at the floor with a red face, her fists shaking as she clenched them hard to contain her immense elation at seeing the one she was interested in flex a bit. I was still faring fairly well, mostly as a result of focusing most of my consciousness on the main body who was diligently practicing using Kundya at home, meditating when I got low on mana. Before I knew it, we were sitting at a wooden table in what looked like a very traditional tavern, immensely reminiscent of what one would expect from traditional RPGs. It was just a bit weird to end up here after walking through a modern city filled with skyscrapers and neon lights. Just like the game, this world was set in the same period as the Earth was, meaning that the year was currently 2020 and the modern society was a reflection of it. After giving our orders to the lovely waitress, who happened to be a big burly man with a bushy beard, there was more small talk to be had, with Arthur taking the lead, with his smile shining on us, making me want to raise my hands to block the light. He started talking about what would happen next weekend. "So what do you guys think about the upcoming ranking event next week? I don't know if I will do well, but I'm going to do my best to try and claim a spot in the A class." Wait, what is he talking about? Tournament? It wasn't that I couldn't easily conclude that we would be having some kind of tests to determine our specific rankings, which also gave us the chance to climb up from the B class. It was just that I hadn't heard about it before. Even Sophie appeared to already know about it. I think it'll be fun. Though I think I will appreciate the duels a lot more than the survival part of the test. Ugh. Just thinking about spending 3 days in a forest makes my skin itchy. As she pretended to scratch her arms, Anna just dismissed her silly words. "We are allowed to bring insect repellent, Also, shouldn't a commoner like you be used to being around insects? Shut up, you stupid noble. Maybe you should go back to your castle and ride around a unicorn or something. Although they were throwing harsh words at each other, they were both laughing and smiling, clearly showing it was all just some friendly banter. Why doesn't Sophie react like that when I tease her? A mystery, that's what it was. An enigma I wouldn't get the answer to in a long time, mainly because I never asked her. Then the stereotype-breaking princess opened her mouth, speaking timidly and abashed like always. James? It couldn't be helped that I didn't know that she carried herself proudly for the majority of the time, and that it was, in fact, mainly my presence that made her act like this. Turning my head to the lovely princess, I replied curtly, "Ye." She brushed away a lock of her golden hair that had fallen to her face as she continued, "Do you have someone who you wanted to team up with in the survival? I heard that if you don't register as a pair before Tuesday, the teachers would pair up the remaining students themselves, or you would have to go solo." I guess she was impressed by my little display on the train. Sadly, I don't think we could work well together, and if her words are true, I would very much like to go solo if possible. Letting on a polite smile, turned her down before she could even ask me to pair up. "Sorry, Sarah. I'm planning on doing the survival event by myself. I don't want anyone to feel burdened by having to team up with me. I'm pretty weak after all." A frank but polite refusal, check. Explaining my reasoning, check. Doing the pity dance, check. All in all, I would rate my performance an 8/10. As expected, she didn't force the subject on me anymore after that, and as if waiting for our conversation to end, our food got served to our table. Big plates filled to the brim with food and wooden mugs containing our selected drinks. It smelled delicious, tasted delicious, but felt like shit. Why? Because I had spent $250 just to get a steak and an ale. That was a quarter of all of my assets just thrown away, getting eaten up in a matter of minutes. "Oh, do you really like the food that much, James? I mean, even to the point of tearing up?" "Yes, Arthur." "Even to the point of tearing up?"